Got to get some like actual applause. Some actual stuff, right? We're live. Me6 in the Discord is telling me that we're live. Everybody, welcome. This is Talking Guitars. Tonight we have Jim Decola. And it is November 18th, 2022. It's 8:04 p.m. Eastern, 5:04 Pacific. And if you're brand new here, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Smash that thumbs up. Any questions or comments you have in the chat, let us have them. Oh, more applause. And we're going to have a great time. All right, here we go. More applause. There we go. Right on. Right on. Dude. Jim Decola, man. I feel like, I mean, man, I'm glad this is finally happening, and thank you so much for being here. This is
we've been social media friends for a few years now, and it's nice to finally meet, even though it's through a camera. It's fantastic. I feel like I know you. Same with Amanda.
Yeah. The internet is awesome. I love it. More applause. Man. Well, hey, everybody. This is going to be a great show, so make sure to stick around. And hey, really quickly, let's say hello to the top tier of channel members, because that's what we do here. Johnny Beane TV, we have channel membership, and they are the executive producers: Stephen Franklin, Michael Smith, Music Therapy Lads, Majestic PB and J Cat, Thomas Santiago, Guitar Man 45, Sherman Callahan, Thomas Santiago again, John Moronic, R. Habs, David Allen Wright, Warleg, and Michael B. Live. Thank you so much for your continued support for this channel, you guys. You guys are awesome. You guys know the drill. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter. So yeah. So Jim Decola. Well, let me just. I don't know where to start, man. I mean, I've been aware of your builds, your building. Especially with, as you were saying, with the internet, social media. I mean, I've seen so much of your stuff. Over the years, and it's just incredible.
The internet really is good. I mean, it brings a lot of people together, like we said, and it just all the information sharing is just fantastic. We all learn a lot more, and especially when you're in a passionate activity like guitar playing and music and things like that. I mean, 30 years ago we didn't have this, and it was just not. It is good, I mean, here, we can share ideas, information, unique instruments, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and it's just incredible, because I mean, I see you on Facebook all the time. Was that today, that photo that you posted?
Yeah,
you posted
Brad
a photo
Paisley.
with Brad Paisley. Yeah.
He stopped by the factory, and I gave him a tour. He's a very, very nice guy. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Very cool. I've seen a lot of,
I even have to say, it was very cool. It was the first time I met him, but it was almost like I knew him, because he has this hobby that he developed during COVID of refinishing guitars. And so he's like, has a shop in his backyard, and, he's working on guitars, and he was asking a lot of really cool and insightful questions regarding a lot of that stuff. So you'd definitely tell that he's into it. That's cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's guitars are awesome. Let's see. And Amanda, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to see you.
Thank you. To add on that COVID, like the new hobbies, I was definitely a part of that. I was like, if I have a year, I'm just going to start building prototypes from my bedroom. Yeah.
That was the upside of COVID. For one, in the music industry, it really gave music a huge boom, right? Because so many people were cooped up inside. And at first, we were all feeling sorry for the performing artists because they couldn't play shows. But at the same time, I kind of thought about it, and I said, you know what, this is actually kind of good. And it kind of played out that way. I suspected, since they can't play live, they're going to have to sit down and create some music and luckily they, the majority of artists did, and now we're the beneficiaries of all that. So it was a fruitful time for new music, and for bringing in a lot of new players and bringing back a lot of old players. Mm-hmm. So there was a huge guitar boom. Gibson, Fender, all the companies were selling more guitars than they had in years, and it was a really good time for that. We hope it continues.
Oh, definitely.
In fact, I'm in my shop, and during the second week of shutdown, I had this idea when I saw more people posting videos, sitting in front of their iPhone, playing a song and posting it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these people were people that weren't the usual suspects. And so I thought, I bet you there's going to be a lot of people like that pulling their old guitars out and they want to play, and maybe they hadn't been restrung in a while, or they need some setup. So I had this idea to do this series of guitar repair and maintenance videos. And so I texted some of my colleagues at Gibson and said, hey, I have this idea. They're like, well, yeah, but how are we going to do it? And I said, well, I'll just film it in my shop. I think I could do it with my iPhone and edit, They're like, well, if you want to do it, so I think I shot like 8 episodes, and, I scripted them out, and I had to get special, apps and things and learn how to edit videos and all that. Mm-hmm. And I did the first few, and they were really excited. And they said, well, what we're going to do is post this on our Instagram site. And then later on, when, the pandemic lifts up, then we'll shoot it with our real film crew and put it on our website. So we did that. And after a few episodes, then I was asking our film people at work, like, hey, for a 6 to 8 minute video, it's probably taken me like 6 to 8 hours. Am I doing something like really, really wrong? And they're like, no, that's about it. That, you're fine. So I'm like, all right, now I know what it's like working in that end of the industry, right? Except on a very small scale. And it was a great experience, So, and then at the same time, I'd say, hey, at Gibson, we use a 6-inch ruler for action, or we use whatever tool, but I try to give everyone these like MacGyver tech tips. If you don't have a 6-inch rule, which most people aren't going to have, you can use a dime for your action gauge at the 12th fret, or a nickel on the low E side and a dime for the high E, or a thin pick, at your nut, and so forth. Business card or a sheet of paper for your neck adjustment. So it was really good, and I still get a lot of emails and comments, people that are appreciative. So I think that was a cool thing, I helped some people, and it's all good. And I learned some skills too.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude. I mean, with the past couple of years, everybody's on their phones and just learning a lot of new stuff. And I was helping a lot of friends out actually with streaming and kind of like what we're doing here and stuff like that. And I mean, it's a great skill to have regardless, whatever you do,
Yeah, when I first started, which was 43 years now, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't, just taking a photograph of a guitar you built was like, it cost a little money to get that film and get that film developed, and wasn't as easy now. You just shoot off dozens and dozens of photos of anything, delete them later if you need to.
Yeah.
So, the whole industry and, from manufacturing or music, it's just ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The future is awesome.
It is.
Man, so we've got some questions. We've got some questions for Jim in the chat. If you guys have questions, you can drop in the chat. Jim can see the chat. And by the way, let's see. Let's give some quick shout outs here. We got Jeremy Hefner. Do you know Jeremy? Jim?
I know Jeremy through social.
Jeremy. He's a big Peavey Wolfgang fan.
Yeah.
Huge. Look at that. Jeremy Hefner is here. We got Wayne Furman is here on Facebook. Yes, we got Facebook. We got YouTube. 0812 is here. Janice Lala, Holly Lewis, Donald Young.
David Wright, and I know David. He lives in Nashville.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a great dude. I've had him on my shows here. Well, it's been several years, but he's been on a lot of times, and talk about knowledge. That guy, man.
It's funny, some of these people, they have so much knowledge of the guitar, like the Wolfgang. And let me preface this with, while I was in charge of that project, for 5 years or a little longer at Peavey, we'd have a stack of blueprints, and they were all my blueprints. And I could tell you every single dimension on every single blueprint from memory. I mean, there wasn't anything. Anyone could ask me, what's the dimension for this? And I could tell them without looking at a blueprint. Then years pass, and people will come to me and say, hey, did you ever make like a hardtail Wolfgang special? And I'm like, I don't know. And then someone will come up, yeah, you did. It's like, I can't remember that. So it's kind of funny. Some things you forget.
Yeah. And man, just amazing. We got Alan Garber in the chat. I don't know if you know Alan from from Social. Rob Johnson, another good friend of mine.
Absolutely.
A lot of these guys, huge fans of these guitars, Jim. I mean, I'm sure you know from Facebook and stuff. But yeah, people, they love this stuff, and it's just amazing. Yeah. So I don't know. So we've got some questions, Amanda. I don't know if we want to start with some of those.
Yeah.
All right. First question here was guitar your first instrument, and if so, what age did you start playing?
It was my first real instrument. Yeah, my dad was a trumpet player, although he played other instruments too, but that was his primary. And I grew up around music, through him, and I had an older brother and sister. My brother was 10 years older, and my sister 5 years older, so I was influenced by them and my dad. And there was always instruments around to doodle with, but it was really guitar. That was it. And I was 15 when I started. And I remembered my brother when he was 18 and I was 8 telling me, Jimmy, look at me. I'm too old. You need to start playing guitar. And I look back on it now, Eric Clapton was 17 when he started. My brother could have started when he was 18. There's no age rule when you should start. Mm-hmm. If you retire and you're looking for something to do, pick up guitar. You're not too old.
Mm-hmm.
Just have fun with it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, guitar was my first. I wanted to play. Now, here's a funny one. I wanted to play trumpet because my dad was a trumpet player, right? Mm-hmm. So in 5th grade music class, at the end of the year, we signed up to take, music classes for junior high to sign up for the band. And my 5th grade music teacher, who shall remain nameless, said, no, you're not cut out to play music. You're not made for that. You're not going to play. I'm not going to let you sign up for any instrument. She didn't like me. Hard to believe, but I was a long hair at one time. So in 5th grade, I had shoulder length blonde hair. I wore a denim jacket with Mr. Natural on one patch and Sgt. Pepper on the other, and an American flag on the back. So I was a little hippie, and she didn't like me. And then she didn't like the fact that I couldn't remember all the lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner, so she made me write them 3 times. So I thought, I know what to do. So I used the technology from the day, carbon paper. So she said, carbon paper. Now you can write them 7 times. So then I had to write them 7 times. And I think that's where she developed her aversion towards me, So when it came time to signing up for junior high music, she said, nope, you're not cut out for music. So then I was like, yeah, I guess I'm not. And then finally, I had a lot of friends who were playing guitar, and I thought, I'm going to play guitar. So it was good, and I'm glad I did, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So who were your influences on the guitar, and like what type of music were you first into?
Well, being that I had my older brother and sister, I was definitely influenced of the rock of the day, So it was Beatles and Stones and Cream and Hendrix and Zeppelin and all that, just the classic rock, from that era, and that's really, I mean, I'm 59, and I can remember when Pepper came out, even before I was really serious. Pepper came out beginning of June in 67, and I was 4 years old. and my sister was babysitting me and my younger sister, and we went down the block to her friend, and her friend had this tent in the backyard and an extension cord going from the house to the tent. And so, you know, you're 4 years old and you're like, wow, what is this? You know, something, it looks serious. So we get in the tent, and she has one of those suitcase phonographs, and she got Sergeant Pepper. It just came out like the day before. So she puts that Sergeant Pepper record on, and I could remember it like it was yesterday. And then we're looking at the cover, and they're explaining, well, that's the old Beatles and that's the new Beatles. And, you know, I'm bawling because I thought they died and they replaced them with some new people. And, you know,
wow, they replaced Paul.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was even the all his dead rumors. Yeah. So really, you know, I have to say after all these years, that's still my favorite album and my favorite band. You know, it just made, I guess that's when my melodic center was formed, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I gravitate towards that. But then you get older and your tastes change and you get more diverse. And then there's certain things you listen to certain times, other things you listen to other times, you know. So I do like all kinds of music. But I always, if you're asking me for my one thing, it's usually the Beatles, you know. That was like the most important growing up.
Yeah. Oh, right on, man. Right on. Did you happen to catch that special that was on, was it on Disney?
Yeah,
was it, or Get Back, yeah?
Yeah. It was fantastic. And being such a hardcore Beatle fan, I read everything I can, but there's still a lot of stuff. Like I was surprised, especially the first episode. I was just like, wow, this is so dysfunctional. I can't see how anything's going to materialize through this. And so it kind of made it riveting. And by second episode, I think I was getting even more angry because it was like, come on, quit screwing around. You need to get some stuff done. And then finally you see it start to, you know, evolve, and, you know, it was cool. And then it's just mind blowing that they recorded how many songs on the rooftop that actually made it on the record. And you would never guess they were live and filmed on top of the rooftop, you know, just amazing. So, yeah, I enjoyed that.
It's incredible. Yeah, I only caught like, I think 3 episodes and then had to get rid of Disney and didn't get to watch the rest of them.
Watched the 3 and then failed on it.
When the last one I saw, I think George left, and so I don't know if he came back or not because I didn't get to watch the rest.
He did. Yeah, we all know how it ends now. Yeah, but seeing that 3-part thing was just, you know, being a fly on the wall was just crazy. You know, just seeing them work. I mean, they're just taking guitars and just like laying them down on the drum rise, and then George just slides off and falls on the floor, and you know,
I saw that one.
Yeah, I saw things we take for granted, like guitar stands. You know, they didn't have access to.
Wow, just imagine if all our favorite bands had like footage like that, or like some sort of something like that. It would just be incredible.
Well, I've seen early photos of Van Halen when they're rehearsing, and you see cables all over the floor and guitars laying on the floor, and you know, it's kind of that. I imagine, you know, I haven't seen videos of it, but I'm sure there's a lot of it that paralleled them too. You know, in a similar way.
Yeah.
You know, in a way, you know, bands are kind of the same. You know, it's a relationship, and that's where you get a lot of that friction between members because they're all so passionate. And if, you know, one guy is trying to push something in a certain direction and someone disagrees, then, well, that's when the disagreements happen. But, you know, everyone's just that wrapped up into it.
Yeah. Let's see. Man, I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat. There's a lot. We got
can't
about
even
60.
Keep up with them.
We got 60 people here. This is awesome, you guys. Smash that thumbs up. We only got 22 thumbs ups, but 60 here. How is that possible? Smash that thumbs up, you guys. Let's see. Alan's got some of the major questions, I'm sure, as you know, Jim. Let's see. What was he saying? Yeah, by the way, well, let's make it easy. In the chat, if you have a question, put a Q in front of your question so we can see pretty easily that it's a question. Let's see. We got that one. Well, next question on the list. What got you into building guitars?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So I started playing guitar. My very, very first guitar was a Gibson SG. And I was very fortunate to start out with a good guitar. And a big part of that was because my dad, being a musician, understood the importance of having a good instrument. And so that helped. And then how I got it was kind of interesting. And that's a cool story. And since that's what we're here to do today, tell stories, I'm going to share this one. So before guitar, my big passion was skateboarding. And that's what I'm back into it now as an adult. So I started skateboarding in 1975 on a clay wheel, Black Knight, open bearings and all that. And then when the Dogtown scene happened in the magazines, all the Dogtown guys, Jay Adams and Tony Alva and Stacy Peralta, Shogo, all those guys, they were rock stars. I mean, they were for real rock stars. I mean, we all wanted to be them. They were badasses, And so that, really influenced that world. And they were all in their interviews, they talk about surfing. They were all really surfers, and they got into skating because if the waves were down, they wanted something similar. And so they'd skateboard, and then that kind of took over, right? But so anyway, my sister was going to ASU, and I went to visit her spring break, and this was like in 70. I can't remember if it was 78, and then how it played out, if it was early 79. I think it was 78. And I went on spring break, so went to some skate parks while I was there, and then she said, "Hey, tomorrow Big Surf opens. It's this man-made wave place, and you can rent surfboards and surf there." And so I thought, oh yeah, like my heroes, that's cool. So we got there, and it opened at noon. And so there's a big long line. And so they only allow 8 surfboards at one time. So they were all taken. So the guy said, well, just get a raft. And then when a surfboard is available, then you can have that. So I got a raft, and this place is 50 yards by 100 yards, like the size of a football field, with this big, huge wall and then hydraulics to make the wave. And when the wave came, I turn around and it's just scooping everybody up. And when it got to me, I'm tumbling, and I just see bubbles and sunlight, and I'm doing somersaults under the water. And I don't know if I hit something or someone hit me, or if I hit the bottom. I don't know what, something hit me. And I got out, and my older sister said, "Oh no, you have a bloody nose," And I went, and she goes, "No, not that kind of bloody. It's split," So I went to the bathroom, and it was split down the center, like the skin, and pushed over. And so she took me to the medic, and there was a line at least 15 people deep. And this was at 12:20, and that was the first wave I was on. They opened at noon. So there was at least 15 people in front of me with like broken wrists or ankles or whatever else. I was the third broken nose. So they told
Was it all from that ride?
Yeah.
Were they all from that? All those people?
I don't know if it was all from the first wave or I mean, I was there from my first wave, and there were 15 people in front of me. So evidently, yeah. And they told us all, hey, if it was obviously broken, they say, whatever the doctor bill, like, yeah, you have to go see a doctor. And whatever the doctor bill is, give us a copy, and we'll double it so you don't sue us. We didn't threaten, but that was their thing. Give us a copy of it, and we'll double it just so you don't sue us. All right. I didn't, whatever. So I get it taken care of, and a few months later, my mom gets the mail, and she goes, "Hey, look at this, Big Surf, hey, the check, So I received $808. So it was $404 to fix my broken nose at that time.
Oh wow!
And so she said, "Well, it was your nose, you wanted a guitar. Why don't you buy a guitar?" And so I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." So then because of that, then I ended up with the Gibson SG exclusive, and then a Roland Cube 20 for an amp. I had some buddies who were already playing for a few years, and so they kind of guided me. And I got that SG because so I walked out with this ebony exclusive, and that Roland Cube 20, and it had a master volume, which my buddies said was unprecedented on a practice amp from that era, And I still have both the guitar and the amp, and they're both fine, I mean, I was guided right on that first purchase, So that's how I got my first guitar and my first amp.
Oh, that's a great story, man.
Jim, we're kind of the same, Jim, because I was a skateboarder before I started playing guitar.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't want to ruin my wrists. And then I started playing guitar, and it was really like, I mean, I grew up in the early 2000s, so I was the Tony Hawk Pro Skater game era.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was a skateboarder first, and then I definitely got into guitar more so. I don't have the cool story of getting money from someone. But yeah, definitely a skater.
And you know, on that note, you know, I know since I got back into skateboarding, once guitar took over, skateboarding at that time, you know, in the 70s was a big boom. And by 80, it was really starting to go down. It kind of ebbs and flows every decade. So at that point, you know, I was playing guitar, my other buddies were playing guitar, and we all kind of got away from skateboarding, and guitar took over, you know. And then shortly after I started, the new school year started, and I had to make a more involved project. You know, the year before, we all had to make this one stool, you know, to the blueprint, and then you got graded on it. And then after that, you could make whatever projects you wanted. So I was making a lot of skateboards and stuff. Some of my buddies were making pipes and hookahs and whatever kids did back in the 70s. But I was making skateboards. And so then this next year started. And, you know, the first class, you know, the teacher said, all right, start thinking about what you want to do. And you have to step it up. It has to be more complex than last year, you know. So I couldn't think of what to do. And I'm reading a Guitar Player magazine before class. And a buddy said, hey, why don't you try making a guitar? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. And so I started asking some other friends who've been playing for quite a while. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. But, you know, you got to make sure the frets have to be in the right spot and the bridge has to be in the right spot and all that. So I started measuring my friends' guitars and, you know, kind of reverse engineering it. And I decided I wanted an Explorer because Alan Collins from Skynyrd and Matthias Jabs from Scorpions both had them. And I just thought, man, that Explorer looks badass, you know. I'd like an Explorer. And then my buddy had a Strat, and I liked the whammy bar. And I thought, wow, you know, it'd be cool if I had a whammy bar on an Explorer. And then I liked the way the Strat had the pickups and the controls modular on the pick guard, right? So you had to do a blueprint first to show your project. I did that. And then I started sourcing parts. And before I knew it, I was like, and this is in 79, I was like a little over $300 in parts, which that's a lot of money in 1979. But, you know, I was a busboy at a Chinese restaurant at the time. So I was making a little bit of bank, you know, and I was investing in my parts, and I'd have to buy the parts so I could measure them and, you know, fit them to the guitar and all this stuff as I was designing it, working on it. And when it came to the pick guard, I couldn't find pick guard material. You know, it wasn't like now where a lot of stores carry a lot of replacement parts. So I got the phone book out and I'm calling all these plastic places I could find in the phone book. I grew up in a town called Munster, Indiana, which is northwest corner of Indiana. So we were like 20 minutes out of Chicago, 20 minutes out of Gary. I find a plastic place in Gary and describe what I was looking for. And they said, well, we think we have something, you know, like, you know, 1/8 inch thick or whatever. So I went there and they had this stuff they called gray smoked mirror plex. So it was really black mirror plex, right? And I thought, wow, that looks cool. That'd be awesome to make a pick guard out of that. So I bought some, and I already had in junior high, back in the day in the 70s, junior high and high school all had industrial arts classes. So I already had woods and plastics and metal and even sewing and cooking in junior high. I already knew how to cut acrylic and buff it and polish it. So I made this pick guard and buffed and polished the edges and cut it out and mounted the electronics to it. But I was too scared to solder the electronics to the pots because one of my buddies told me you should buy Bourne's pots. At the time, Bourne's were considered the bomb. And you can't, and then he said, but you can't solder to the back of them like regular pots. And so I was afraid I might burn something up. So I took it to the local shop to have him wire it. And so he wired it. And the next week I came in for lessons. The pickguard was ready. And then he wanted to talk to me. And so he asked me to apprentice with him. So just seeing the pickguard got me my start in the industry. And then I brought the guitar in after I put it together. And it turned out fine. I got an A in it. And that first guitar of mine was actually one more guitar I made than the guy I was apprenticing with, which was kind of cool. So, yeah, it turned out, you know, so that kind of set me on the course. And I did that through high school, and I was in DECA, which is Distributive Education Clubs of America. You know, it was like this, I jokingly call it a work release program. You know, it was, you know, you have your class, and it was part of sales and marketing. And then if you had a job, then you go to your job and you get credit for it. So by that time I had enough credits to where I was only going to school for like a half a day, maybe not even a half a day, and then working, getting credit for that. And then literally the week I graduated high school, that guy left, and then the owners of the store allowed me to take over, which is a big, you know, gain of confidence, you know, for me, you know, having them allow me to do that. So it was very cool. So that's how I got started. And so I literally grew up doing that, you know. It was a good experience. And then I held that shop down until it was called Music Lab in Lansing, Illinois. So I worked there, heading up the shop, doing repairs and custom building from at that point, it was actually 81, from June of 81 until April 88. Then Peavey hired me as an R&D tech. And so I left the shop and went to Peavey in 88. So yeah, it was a good process. And there's a lot to be said about learning in a repair environment, because you can't call the shots, you know, you're playing the card that's dealt, you know, so it was a great learning experience doing that stuff. So I was fortunate for that. And then it turned out one of the owners, there were 3 owners, you know, at least that it was told to me, you know, there were 3 owners. Actually, there were 4. And I didn't know who the 4th owner was. And he was actually the one who started the store, but he had to be a shadow owner because he was working at Gibson at the time. So it was Bruce Boland who was in charge of Gibson, and he was good friends with the owners. And so he hired them, or partnered with them, to be, you know, the actual, you know, day-to-day, you know, people who ran the shop. And then he was just in the background, shadow owner. And he'd come in and I'd see prototypes, like the very first Chet Atkins, you know, solid body acoustic thing, classical. I saw all sorts of crazy stuff, you know, he'd bring in, then you'd see it. You just wanted to see what other people thought in a music store environment, you know, to kind of like prove out their theories. So I got to see a lot of cool stuff. And then after I left Peavey in 2000, then he hired me at Fender. And that's when I found out I go, I know you're good friends of the store. He goes, well, you don't know the whole story, do you? And I go, no. So that's when he said he was actually the owner who started it, you know? So that was kind of coincidental that it was all intertwined like that. And then now I'm basically like his counterpart nowadays here at Gibson. So that's kind of cool.
That's great. Hey, Ned. My cat Ned is here. I think he has a question. Come here. Wow, dude. Yeah, that's amazing. Let's see. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions. Rob Blackmore Official is asking, hey Jim, what is your favorite Van Halen song that Eddie played on the Peavey Wolfgang?
Oh. I would have to say, and you'll have to forgive me because I was so busy during that time that the names of the songs and stuff I'm very foggy on. So it was the Cherry Red special that he used in the video for the song. I can't remember the name of the song, but he used it in the video.
Without You.
Yeah, Without You. Yeah.
Without You from Van Halen 3. I loved that guitar.
Yeah, so that was cool, and I was proud that he used that guitar, and it was unique, and you know, that was cool. The Twister stuff, you know, he used it on the Twister soundtrack songs, and that was really cool. And but yeah, you know, I'm bad about remembering songs and lyrics. For me, music is music, and words are different. You know, the words are words. So even like Beatles songs I grew up with, I'm real foggy on lyrics, unless I intentionally am trying to like learn one to sing, but. You know, I'm bad with words, but yeah. But I do dig. I know there's the camps. You know, on the Van Halen note, the 2 camps, Sammy versus Dave. You know, and if you like Van Halen, you like Van Halen. You know, and you know, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't like one or the other. You know, like it all. It's all good.
It's all Edward.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Yeah, man. Well, dude, I'm glad you brought up that cherry guitar, the one with the P90s, right?
Yeah,
That
that's
one.
it. Yeah.
I always liked that one. When I first saw it in the video, and so you built that one?
Yeah, yeah. I built all his prototypes from the very beginning, which I'll show you in a little bit. The very first guitar,
Whoa.
I built all the prototypes from '95, early '95 until I left in, I think it was April of 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So every prototype I built.
Dang.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
That's
I did the
incredible.
pickups and buzz out the guitars and necks, and carve them, machine them, paint them, wind the pickups. I did it all.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Let's see. Our friend Dakota here in the chat. Hey Johnny, did you see the tweet I sent you? Dakota, he wants us to show you a guitar that he has. Let's see. Where did you send that? Here it is. I think it's his friend's guitar. I think is what he was saying. But it's a Peavey Wolfgang.
Oh yeah,
That one.
cherry sunburst.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that I
Probably,
had was similar to that.
yeah, I'd say that's probably 98 or 99, I think, when we came out with the cherry sunburst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't
That's
have a cherry
cool.
sunburst. I still have several, most of them prototypes, but I don't have a cherry sunburst one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day when I get time, I'll make one.
Oh man. Do you build guitars that well, I'm assuming you do. You work on guitars every day, but I'm trying to unblurry my camera.
Ah,
Um but do you like think of a guitar and then just build it like for
uh,
yourself?
sometimes I'll do things, usually like at home, even though I have my shop here. I don't like to do the real heavy stuff, making sawdust. I like to keep it
Mm-hmm.
a little cleaner. So most of the stuff I'll do at home will be like pickup winding or refretting or working on that level. But I do, I mean, I have all my bandsaws and sanders and everything here, but I just don't do it all the time. And frankly, when you do it for a living all the time, uh, you don't want to come home and do the same thing all the time. But if I do,
Yeah.
like I made myself a short scale bass about 10 years ago. And that was one of those projects where I was just burning, like, I don't know, well, we all know what it's like, when you have the fever for a guitar, you just have to have it. And the world's not stopping
Yeah.
until you get it. So I had this thing,
Yeah.
and I just wanted a short scale bass for whatever reason. And so I designed this thing and made it entirely in my garage. But I oil finished it. I didn't want to get into the spraying and all that at home. So I used like this exotic mahogany that looked really cool with oil finish and oil finish the neck and all that. So yeah, I did that entirely in the garage. And then sometimes, I may take some project, that was half finished and finish it off in here, or maybe take something into work and work on it a little bit and then bring it home and finish it off. I do enjoy
Mm-hmm.
working on guitars. I mean, you don't want to do it, you know, 24 hours a day, like any job, no matter how much you like it, you still have to have a little separation. But I do have to have my shop, and I do love working on them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, to get to your level, you have to enjoy it. I mean, really, there has to be really something special there that where it's like just amazing. I'm horrible at well, I can throw a guitar together, but I can't paint. I'm horrible at painting. Um, but our friend Amanda here is actually amazing at painting.
Yeah. Yeah. That I know. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got lucky, and I know I've talked about it with Johnny, but my grandfather, I mean, he painted cars, painted Cadillacs back in like the 50s or the 60s, and he was always fixing everything. So he would work during the day, and then at night he ran a shop out of the house, and people would come with their electronics and he would fix everything. So he was also an engineer, but he also played trumpet. And then his
Wow.
father restored violins and worked and built violins for a living. So, and then cut hairs, like
Oh,
super
wow.
Polish. We did everything. So I got really lucky, and I just kind of was born into a family where it's like you don't buy it, you build it, and super musical.
Yeah, and there's so much satisfaction in doing that.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the thing that really drives me. No matter what I was into, if it was, you know, skateboards or guitars or you know, whatever, I always have to tear them apart, see what makes them tick, and put them back together, and then start tinkering with them and working on them. And I just enjoy that. You know, I'll do that with tools even, you know, sometimes just, you know, taking tools apart, rebuilding them or modifying them. Yeah, it's just a fun process. Now the art like you do, now that's a different deal. I can paint a guitar, but I can't do the artwork like that, you know. Yeah, that I admit I'm not skilled in that. So
my grandfather had me watching Bob Ross at like 3, and then he would take me down to his wood shop, and then I would sit with him and he'd have me paint on wood and like help him build stuff. So I was just born into this. Like really just started drawing really early on and painting stuff early on, and I've always been artistic, but I also really love modding, and I kind of got the cross between the two. So when I started working on guitars in 2018, I don't know why I hadn't thought of the idea before, but yeah, that was like the first thing I wanted to do, was just like, how do I make this artsy? And then it's just been like a snowball ever since. I can't not think of guitar ideas. I see something, I'm like, how do I make that into a guitar artistically? So yeah, everyone has their own niche.
Yeah, definitely. That's right. Yeah, my painting is limited to, like, you know, sunbursts and, you know, those sort of things, you know, not the fancy, what most people review as art, you know.
Sunbursts are hard. I think I've only done 2 in my life. But
you know, when I do tours at Gibson, when we get into finishing, I'll always explain like this, you know, being master luthier and R&D manager, I can do everything from a concept to a completed guitar. However, I'm always the first to point out all these people at work, like, and I do it when they're spraying a sunburst. I say, now watch what they're doing. They'll knock this sunburst out in 30 to 45 seconds, and it's magnificent. And I say, you see what they just did? It would take me 5 minutes to do that, because I don't do it 8 hours a day every day. Yeah. I did my first one in 1980. I can do a fine sunburst, but it'll take me 5 minutes because I ease into it, and I stand back and kind of squint and look at it and then go back and hit it some more. So it'll take me 5 minutes. It takes them 45 seconds, you know, because they just lay it on. And that's where you have, when you're doing a skill like that and focusing on it 8 hours a day, that's when you develop that. So, yeah, I just, you know, I know my limitations, you know, it's like, I jokingly say, you know, I'm in my position because if they put me on the line, I wouldn't make the cut. You know, I couldn't spray a sunburst as fast as these people. Or maybe I could after a while, you know, but like I couldn't just like replace someone if they were sick, because I just can't do it that fast, you know, like they do. So there's a lot to be said about that. They're all specialists.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And I wouldn't be able to do that at all, no matter what.
Yeah.
But I love a sunburst guitar, man. That's probably, you know, aside from well, my favorite guitar ever is the 5150 guitar. You know, if you know that.
Oh yeah, okay.
But as far as like a regular non Van Halen, you know, paint job, yeah, the sunburst. I love I've got a sunburst Telecaster and sunburst Strat and stuff, and
yeah.
So
I was just trying to find a question someone sent, but I can't find it now. Maybe it'll come up later.
Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of stuff. Let me see. R2R3 Locky Nut. He's a channel member here on Johnny Beane TV here on YouTube. He asked a question. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see. David. Well, here, let's do that one, because that one, he used a super chat, so that one really popped up. David Paulson is saying, what a great show. Thank you. Hey, Jim, is there a chance that Gibson will release the Trem again? Thank you.
That I can't say definitively. I know there's been talk about that, but hopefully so. But I can't confirm nor deny at this point. I hate to be quick, but yeah, hopefully so. Yeah. I actually still have a leftover Trem from when I made the 2 for Eddie. So
Oh my
that's
gosh.
a vintage piece, from 30 years ago or 28 years ago, however long it was.
Wow. So
Yeah.
can I ask a question? Can I ask, how many guitars did you build for Edward that had the Trems on them?
Oh, with the Trem, only 2. There was the ivory one and the black one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe the 2. Yeah, I think there was just the 2. I think just the ivory and the black one. Yeah.
And do you know the songs he used them on?
No. That I don't.
Oh man. Wow, that Trem, that's a cool thing. I had a chance to play a friend's guitar, I don't know, 30 something years ago, and it was a Steinberger with one of those. But I wish I would have realized what it was. I mean, I kind of knew what it was at the time. I wish I would have really messed with it and had fun, because now I would love to play one of those.
Yeah,
because they just look incredible.
Device. Yeah.
We have a friend in the chat here. He goes by the name O812. He was on my show last Saturday night, and he has an original GL2T, and he was playing it and showing it off and everything, and just amazing.
Yeah, that they are, and I had, when we started the project with Ed, well, the guitar version of it, the amp was 92, I think, when we started the amp, somewhere around the early 90s. And at that time we made, we had the heads up that Eddie was going to come and that we're going to start this amp thing, get a guitar ready, because he may want to do a guitar too. And so I made a single humbucker super strat, because that's what he was known for playing. And so he came by the factory. I had that guitar, and then I had my shop amp at the time was a Peavey, I think it was called the VTM, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was VTM, vacuum tube modified. It was kind of like a super modified, like 2204 JCM 800, with some additional switching for changing some things. It was a really cool amp. However, it wasn't Eddie's rig, and it wasn't his guitar. But when he was there and he plugged into that Peavey single humbucker, based off of like a Tracer or a Falcon or something like that, into that Peavey amp, sounded like Eddie. It wasn't his rig. It was just that guitar into that amp, sounded like Eddie. It really did. That's the secret.
Wow. Yeah.
His fingers. It really is. I mean, all the other gear helps him get there. It does make a difference, but 90% of it, they're his fingers and his hands.
Yeah,
and
it's
his ears,
it's the person. It's the player.
Yeah.
It's definitely the player. And Edward, I mean, he's the prime example of that, and it's just amazing. Let me see. Mikey Mojo just dropped a super chat. Jim, tell us some cool stories about first meeting Edward and some cool stories about working with him in the shop.
Okay. Here's a funny one. Now this one, before I really met him, the year he debuted with Kramer, I'm at the NAMM show, and I see this big, huge, group of people crowding around the Kramer booth. I'm like, what's going on? And so, I kind of go through the crowd, and, I see, a bunch of people. I still can't see what's going on. And I asked this other guy, who was Paul Dean from Loverboy. He was right next to me, and I'm like, what's the big deal? What's going on here? And he said, Van Halen's here, he's debuting his new guitar. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. So, saw that, and, it was a big deal, I mean, it was his debut, with Kramer. So, that was pretty heavy to witness that. And then let me back up a little bit. During that time, it wasn't anything to go to an NAMM show and see someone like Eddie or Elliot Easton or Paul Dean or Les Paul or Chet Atkins. You just saw those people all the time. You took it for granted. Leo Fender, I met him a couple times. So it was cool, being able to grow up during that era. But the funny part of the story was we were leaving the convention center, and this is in Chicago. We're going through the S curve, which was I think they got rid of it because it was so dangerous. But the S curve was this notorious curve along Lakeshore Drive. So we're at the light, and my buddy Danny, I'm going to give him a shout out, Dan Ryan, says, "Hey, Eddie and Val are in the limo next to us." And I look over, I'm like, "Oh yeah, wow," you know. So he rolls down the window and he waves, and Eddie, you know, presses the button, the window comes down. He's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And he said, "Hey, why are you playing Kramer guitars?" And he's like, "Hey, Kramer's are good guitars." And he's like, "Why don't you have this guy build you a guitar? He'll build you a guitar." And, you know, he's just trying to like pump me up because he's proud of me because he's a buddy I worked with in the music store and was in bands with. Yeah. So he's like, "You need to get this guy to make a guitar. He'll make you a guitar." And Eddie goes, "No, man, Kramer's a good guitar." And so, and I'm like, "Oh no, this is not good," you know? So he's like, no, you need to get him to make, you know, so he's trying to like pump me up to him, you know? And then finally, Valerie said, "Well, Eddie makes his own guitars." And then Danny said, "Well, they must not be any good or else you wouldn't be endorsing Kramer's." And I was like, "Oh no, why would you say that? That was horrible," you know? So at this point I'm hiding, you know, I'm ducking down in the co-pilot seat. And last thing I saw, the light changes and, you know, Danny's shaking his fist at Eddie and Eddie's shaking his fist at Danny. And I'm like, "God." And then, you know, gosh, years later, then I'm making his guitar.
Did you ever tell him that story?
I did. And he kind of thought about it. He's like, "Yeah, I don't remember that." So, yeah, but it happened. Yeah. So that was the first time I met him. Now, the first time I actually met him was when he came to the factory, you know, for that guitar and amp thing. And so we had the guitar already, and, you know, he came into my office, you know, at the factory, had the rig set up, and he played it, and he was like, "Yeah, cool," and all this stuff. And then he left. And then about a week later, but while he was there, we had this guitar called the Odyssey. And that was kind of Peavey's version of the Les Paul at the time, you know, because this is shortly after Appetite for Destruction. And we were at, you know, the McCormick place, and we heard Sweet Child of Mine playing. First time we ever heard it. And we're at this trade show. And we're like, "Wow, what is that? This is like every best guitar sound wrapped up into one," you know? And so we looked at each other. We're like, "Wow, you know what this means? It's not the Strat Decade anymore. I guarantee the Les Paul's coming back." And it really did. That song changed everything. And so we came out with that Odyssey, which is kind of Peavey's version of the Les Paul, but it was a little different. It was really more similar to what Paul Reed Smith later came out with as his single cut, because it had more of a, I don't know how to describe it. It kind of dropped a little bit, not as oval, you know, as the rear end of a Les Paul. And then I added like a Telecaster kind of contour on the top end of the neck, you know, in that upper bout. So it was easier to sand. And so Eddie pulled that off the wall, and he's like, "Well, what's this?" I said, "Well, that's our Les Paul, you know, our Odyssey, you know." And he goes, "Well, that's kind of cool." And he was checking it out and playing it, and he quit playing the Strat and was playing that. And then didn't think anything of it. And then about a week later, we heard that he already signed the thing with Ernie Ball, and then and that he was just going to do the amp. So we're like, okay, whatever. And then when it came out, it was kind of a little similar, you know. It was that Les Telly kind of thing, you know. So I don't know if that was directly the influence. I know Dudley Gimple was responsible for designing that, but I don't know if it must be just coincidence. A lot of times that's the way that stuff happens. But it was just interesting nonetheless. So that was cool. And he was very cool, very personable. And then so we did the amp, and then a few years pass, and then I got word from Hartley Peavey, the owner, and Len McRae, who's in charge of artist relations at the time. And they said, "Hey, it looks like we might have a chance. It looks like, you know, something happened, you know, with Eddie and Ernie Ball. We might have a chance with a guitar. And, you know, do you think you can do it?" I'm like, "Well, if you're giving me the chance, you know, hell yeah, you know, let me at it, you know." So they got me one of his music vans, you know, just to kind of use as a guide with the directions. Duplicate this guitar. We want to show him we have the capability to make a guitar to that level of craftsmanship. So just copy it, and we'll prove it to him that we can make that guitar. So I got to work on it, and this is it. So I made a template off the body and copied the body.
Let me see. I'm going to spotlight you. I'm going to spotlight you here so we can see that.
That's it.
Dang.
Gorgeous.
And then the headstock, I put a Peavey headstock on it because I didn't want to, do a direct copy. So I thought, well, I'll do the Peavey headstock, on this. And then I had this neck joint that I received a patent on that I did on the Steve Cropper model. So
right.
It has this aluminum reinforcement that's hidden inside the neck and body joint and allows you to have kind of like a heelless neck joint and still get all, full access to the highest fret, right?
Yeah.
So I did that, but based off of the Music Man. So that's it. Quilt top with a basswood back and bird's eye maple neck.
That looks just like it, man.
Yeah. Really nice bird's eye in this one too.
Beautiful.
Oh man. I like that neck joint, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
dude, that looks just like it. Dang.
Yeah. So I got the guitar done, and they were just starting rehearsals for the Balance tour. So the first show was in Pensacola, Florida. So they rented out the venue for a week before the show, and they were just having, a week's worth of, rehearsals. And then that last night, Friday, then that was the kickoff of the tour. They played a show, for the public, and that was it. So I was there for, I think, 3 days and brought him the guitar, and, he sound checked with it, rehearsed with it and all that. He's like, all right, I know you guys can do a guitar. Now we need to come up with something unique, So then we went back to the factory after that. And then I started thinking about what we should do. And we didn't want to just copy the Music Man. That wouldn't be cool, So I started thinking about it. And then Len told me, hey, it's Wolfgang's birthday is coming up. I think March 15th, if I'm not mistaken, right? So I said, his birthday's coming up. 16th. Okay. I knew it was middle. Okay. So Wolfie's birthday. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll make the guitar how I want to make the guitar for Wolfgang, and that'll butter up the old man. And then he'll like my design, right? So I do that. So I come up with this design, and I make it, like a scaled down 3/4, but not literally a 3/4 size, a small size. And so I had the body done, and then he came in before it was done, and I didn't know. So I said, well, I was trying to get this guitar done. I was trying to do it for Wolfie, but I thought maybe, it would be something like you'd be interested in. And he was so blown away. He goes, yeah, just make it full size. That's it. So that's how the body came about. So and that's why it's named Wolfgang, because that first one was designed for Wolfgang.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's amazing.
Then we talked about the headstock, and he wanted a compact headstock. And so he said, well, I have some designs I did on a napkin, or it was a small sheet of paper. It might have been stationery from the hotel. And it was a Flying V. And I said, well, it's a Flying V. And he goes, yeah, but it's smaller. And I said, well, a patent examiner doesn't care how big it is. It's still an infringement on a Flying V. You could make it twice as big or twice as small. It's still a Flying V. So I go, yeah, it has to be different. So then he drew something else. And I go, well, that's a Washburn. It had a little V, I go, well, that's just a Washburn. He just put a V on top of the Flying V neck. Oh, well, that's a Washburn, or a Deane, like the mini Deanes. So I go, yeah, you can't do that. And I had done this neck for myself that I did, it was a guitar I did at Peavey, but for myself. And I was going to present it to Peavey, but at this point, I didn't have the chance, and it wasn't like the new model year where I'd have a chance to present it. So I pulled that out and I said, well, how about something like this? And he goes, well, I don't know. I still like this other one. I go, yeah, but it looks like a Deane or a Washburn, And so I said, hang on, I got an idea. So I took the neck and I ran out in the factory outside my office, and I got on a spindle sander and I sanded the scoop on.
Oh.
And so it sanded it down to raw wood and highlighted the scoop. So I said,
Uh-huh.
what about this? You know, it's the same headstock, but with the scoop thing, you know, it kind of has a V kind of feature. And he's like, yeah, I dig that. Okay, that's it. So that's it. It happened that quick.
Oh,
And then after
wow.
that, it was all just the final engineering and stuff like that, working out details. You know, I added the carbon fiber because personally, I felt really, you know, I personally felt there's a lot of benefit to the carbon fiber. So I put that in
Mm-hmm.
the first neck I made for him and did a compound. So the first neck I did a compound radius and carbon fiber truss rod reinforcements. And but I didn't say anything because at that time I figured the company would probably say, well, we're going to be adding cost of product and we can't afford to do that, whatever. So I just kind of snuck that carbon fiber into it. But he knew there was something going on, and he could hear it and he could feel it. He's like, man, what's with this? I know there's something with this neck, you know. So, well, there's carbon fiber in it. So he's like, well, that's what we're doing then. So we kept the carbon fiber, and then I didn't want to copy like on this guitar, you know, I did the truss rod up here because that's what we were doing at the time. But with Music Man, I didn't want to copy their truss rod wheel, you know, shooting out of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I didn't want to copy it. And when I was blowing that body up, and in fact, that's the last part of the body story was when I was blowing it up full size, you know, I did it by hand while him and Hartley were there. So I could have my French curves and templates and stuff. And I'm just like manually redrawing it full size. And Hartley gave me the directive. Now, son, make sure not one line or arc is the same as the Music Man. I don't want one goddamn line or arc to be like the Music Man at all. So I had those orders and those exact words, you know, so I knew it was serious. So pardon my language, but that's how it went down.
That's
So
okay.
so with that, I didn't want to copy the rod and, you know, the spoked wheel like that. So I thought, if I recess it into the neck, now it's different. And then it's not compromising the body because like here, you know, I was able to put the pickup right at the end of the neck, but if I had the wheel out, now the pickup would have to move down and there would be that gap in between
Mm-hmm.
the butt of the neck and the pickup. So
Mm-hmm.
with the truss rod wheel recessed, now you can move that pickup closer and you're not compromising that body joint because now you don't have that notch cut out at the end of that joint, which in manufacturing, that wood being so thin, it's very prone to snapping and cracking, you know, as you're machining it out. So I did the recessed wheel, and there again, that made it different. And so little things like that then took, you know, time to, you know, refine and develop all that stuff. So, but the basic design, the body and the headstock, you know, happened that fast. Let's see what else was there.
That's cool.
Then the detuner, you know, that was presented. Adam Reaver presented it to Maddie.
Yes.
He knew Maddie really well, and
Mm-hmm.
Robbie Benson is the guy who came up with the detuner, and he partnered with Adam. You know, and Adam's you know, more the business end of things, right? Yeah, he's a good friend too, and so
Mm-hmm.
Adam presented it to Maddie and Eddie, and Eddie bought the rights to it, and then presented it to us. And then I had to do all the final refinements on that because the concept was there, but it wasn't very refined and it wasn't really working properly just yet. So I did all the final engineering and changed the contour of it and moved the fine tuner 45 degrees off axis so you could get in there and actually fine tune it while it's on the guitar without having to pull it out and do it multiple
Mm-hmm.
times. So little things like that, you know, happened over time, and then just doing all the blueprints for manufacturing, and then designing it for manufacturing, because you know it's one thing to make one guitar, but you have to engineer it and you have to look at you know, all the dimensions and tolerances and everything else. So the design happened quick, but the final engineering, you know, took months and months. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great process.
Oh
It
man.
consumed me. So when I made that first guitar, um, you know, he was there, and once he agreed to the headstock, then it's like, okay, now we need a prototype. And so I said, well, when do you leave? And he's like, well, tomorrow around lunchtime. So I said, well, let me see how much I can get done. So this was about 4 p.m. So him and Len left. And then about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, after dinner, they called and said, hey, man, how you doing? And I said, well, I have the body cut out and I'm carving the top. And, I talked him into going with a contoured top, like a Les Paul, because I wanted to separate it from the Music Man, so I thought having a contoured top and all this stuff, would separate it, because we didn't want to, copy them. We wanted to do something different. We just didn't want it to be a copy. So we did the contoured top, and I saw him while I'm in the middle of carving the top, and he's like, well, do you think you're going to have something for Ed before he leaves? And I said, Len, this is personal. I will have it. I'm going to have this guitar. He's like, all right. So, hung up. I stayed all night. They came in 11 o'clock the next morning, just as I'm tuning it up. So I stayed up all night, made this guitar from scratch, except I didn't paint it. It was just assembled in raw wood. But I bound it, carved it, finished sanded, everything. It was a completely finished guitar except for the paint. Put it together. I'm just doing the fine tuning and intonating it, And here's a funny little side note, and I didn't tell him at the time because I wanted to let the magic stay with him. When I'm just checking the intonation, I'm just, in a hurry, and he's right there. So I check everything. Intonation was spot on. I didn't have to move anything. And so Ed's like, oh my God, you didn't have to turn anything, and the intonation is perfect. Man, that's a sign. And I'm like, you're right. But what he didn't know was I took that Floyd off another guitar. So it was already intonated for another guitar, and it was just kind of lucky that it was close enough. So, but to him, it was magic, so I let him believe it was business. So
that's what I do. That's what I do when I swap in Floyds on my guitar. Is they're already set, and so I just leave them.
Yeah, I mean, the intonation is important. We all know that, but it's not like some people think it's like, oh, change your oil after so many miles, you got to re-intonate it. You intonate when you make it and put it together, and as long as you're keeping it as that and you're not changing the action or the string gauge, you really don't have to intonate it. You might check it once in a while, but it's not going to move unless the screw gets loose and something moves. But yeah, that's why that stuff can happen. Yeah. So he left, and then him and Hartley took some shots. I should have brought those out. Getting on one of Hartley's planes, posing.
That's the poster. There's a poster from a Peavey Monitor magazine where he's holding the guitar. Right. He's there up outside the airplane.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's a red Peavey on the other side of that.
It was well, the guitar was just white wood. I used flame maple for the top at the time because that's what I had, and but it was just raw wood, and the plane. I can't remember which one it was. Hartley had 2 planes at the time. I don't know. He still might still have them. One was a G4 and the other one was a King Air. It was probably the G4 because that was like the big ship, that was like, a $30 million plane. And so I don't think he would have taken the $8 million plane to pick up Eddie. I think he would have gone full bore and taken the G4. So yeah, that was them with that guitar, getting back on the plane. So that was cool. Then after that, it was a matter of just making more prototypes and refining it. Yeah, that's the one.
Right there.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And here's another part of the story too, where the knobs are in the switch. So originally, that's what he had on the Music Man, right?
Oh, right.
So with the Wolfgang, I wanted the 2 knobs and the toggle switch where they're at. And Eddie's like, well, I don't use a tone control. I only use a volume control. And I'm like, yeah, but with the asymmetry of the body, it kind of goes with it. And then the switch being up here goes in line with the controls and it kind of accents the body and follows that. So from a design standpoint, I was really all about that. And he's like, yeah, but I don't use the tone control. And I said, well, why don't we have 2 volume controls instead of a tone control? He goes, oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So then I wired it up as 2 volume controls. And then, but he said, oh, but the switch up here, I knock it out. If I'm tapping and I hit it, it's going to go to the rhythm pickup, and it won't sound right. So I said, all right, we'll just wire it in reverse. It'll be another thing to talk about. So up will be the bridge. That way, if you're playing, think about it ergonomically. And I know it's absurd to a lot of people, especially Gibson, because the Les Paul is not that, right? But I thought about it, and maybe it was because I was rationalizing, what I wanted to do. But I said, think about this. You're playing a rhythm, and it's time for a solo. It's easier to swing your hand up and then go back on the downstroke and start your solo than it is to go down and then hit it. Or if it's down here, pressing it down and then coming back up. So really swiping it up, and now it's a quicker motion than if it was wired in reverse or, like the Music Man. So he's like, yeah, you're right. So I wired it up and he checked it out and he goes, yeah, okay, that's cool. So he kept that. And then after he played the first prototype, they kicked off the Balance tour and he was playing that for a while. And then he said, you know what, the 2 volume control things, it just isn't happening. It's too confusing. So that was one of them. I don't know if that was literally, that was one of them. That was the first cherry red one. A good friend of mine, Taft, owns that guitar now. And wow. But I don't think it was that one. I think it was the violet one that's in the Rock Hall that another friend of mine, Brian Nagel, owns. So,
okay.
And that's in the Rock Hall. He loaned it to the Rock Hall of Fame. So it was that purple one that was originally 2 volumes, and
with the black humbuckers.
Yeah, right. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep. So then I rewired it for tone, and he said, "Well, I just won't use the tone, But for him, it was a safety thing where if he accidentally hit it, it wouldn't as drastically change it, like going from pickup to pickup or turning the volume off. So yeah, that's how that played out. So. And then when we did the special, because it was flat and we all already had the precedent with the contour top and the tone control layout and all that, then we were able to, on that one, I said, okay, we'll just go with 1 volume on that.
On the special, the flat top.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was your idea to do the reverse switch?
Yeah. And that was all because I wanted the switch here because it looked right, with the asymmetry of the body. It was just screaming to be in that location.
Yeah.
It just would not look as cool. Right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
So I just thought it really, all those little things add up to what a guitar is, and I thought that control layout with that body asymmetry just tied it all together. And then with the body asymmetry, and again, I have to give props to Music Man, because they build a fine guitar. And going against them, it was very daunting. Dudley and Sterling, those guys, they do some great work. So that was no easy task. That was quite a challenge. So that's where I wanted legitimate things to separate us and to add value to that guitar. And so all that, and because theirs was symmetrical, I made mine asymmetrical, put that slant in the body. And because of that, I was able to then shift the neck deeper into the body, and then you still had that horn coming out closer to the 12th fret, which improved the balance, so it wasn't as neck heavy. So it improved the balance when it was strapped on, and then it made access to the end of the neck a lot easier because you didn't have a reach like that because it was more like that. So it felt like you were a few frets less of a reach, because it was inset into the body, but then you still had great fret access. So that all kind of worked out coincidentally, just because I couldn't copy that, I had to come up with something different. So it just all landed very nicely.
Man, amazing. R2R3 Locking Nut had a question. Why did Ed change from 10-inch radius to 15 radius on the Peavey?
Yeah, he was using 10 on the Music Man, and there again, when it came time for the neck, I I took dimensions off his Music Man and off of his Frankenstrat. And so the Frankenstrat was very, very narrow. It was like one, I'll have to look at my notes. I still have my notes, but it was about 1.575, 1.585. It was very, very narrow. So that told me that, because that was a Kramer, right? And they were going after like a vintage Fender, which would be 1 5/8, which is 1/625, which is still kind of narrow compared to modern, like vintage Fender spacing is 1 5/8, and the modern Fender spacing is 1 11/16. So his was vintage spacing. And then I said, how many times did you have this guitar refretted? And he was like, 3 or 4 times. I go, well, every time you refret it, it gets narrower and narrower, because you have to take a little bit off. It's just a little bit, but it all adds up. So it was much narrower than it started out. So I said, why don't we take it back to 1 5/8 where it started? And then with the flatter fingerboard, again, there were benefits to having a flatter fingerboard. You could have lower action and, all that kind of stuff and not buzz out. And we weren't doing a 10. At Peavey, we were doing an 8 and a 12 and a 15. And so for whatever reason, I gave him other guitars to try out, and he said 15. I'll stick with 15. So that he selected that. And then let's see, what else did we do? The fret wire, we used the same 6105 style fret wire, which is a good size. It's jumbo, but not too jumbo, kind of medium jumbo. Very popular wire. Let's see what else. Yeah, but as far as the neck, that was it. Like I said, I took dimensions off of both of those guitars, and we brought it back up to what the original dimension would be. So that's how that came about.
Wow, man. Yeah, because I have the original Music Man in '92, and then I used to own a '99 Peavey Wolfgang. I had to, how it is. You have to get rid of stuff, and I wish I still had it, because it actually was my main studio guitar for recording. But I always wondered why the necks. They're really different. I always wondered why.
As far as the back shape, we based it off of that same 5150. Because I didn't want to do like multi-generation of copying. So I went back to the 5150 or Frankenstrat, whatever you want to call it as. So I took the dimensions off of that, and then with the flatter fingerboard, and then increasing the width, so it does make it feel different. A rounder fingerboard is very, very comfortable when you're doing chords. But when you're doing solos, for that style, the flatter the fingerboard, the lower you can get your action and cleaner action. So that's why we decided to go with that. Yeah.
Wow.
Another interesting thing was Music Man processed their fingerboard from the same piece of wood as the neck, right? And that was a very interesting thing. And I saw the benefits into that. And I was going to do that. But how it played out, I ordered bird's eye maple, and I got it from Canada, and it wasn't fully cured. And so when I cut into it to process the first prototype necks, when I resawed it, the wood did that. So when I cut it, it bowed like that against each other. As it came through the bandsaw, it went like that. So if you put it back together, it did that instead of that, right? So I thought, at this point, I'm screwed. What can I do? What can I do? So then I had the idea, since it's I wanted to do a tilt back headstock, again, to be different from Music Man. So I did a tilt back headstock. This wood I was cutting off the back of the neck, right? So I was cutting all this wood away. So as it did that, I thought, well, hell, there's enough wood that I'm cutting from the back. I'll just move it here to the other side of the neck and process the fingerboard out of it. And then it'll counteract, and it'll be a stress relieved lamination. It's coming from the same piece of wood, but now it'll actually be stronger. In the case short term, it allowed me to run damage control on that warped piece of wood, but it glued together fine. And then even on production, it made it a stronger neck because it's a stress relieved lamination. and it's still from the same piece of wood. So the grain and color, even though it's coming from the back onto the front, still look fantastic. So that was another happy mistake, and that it worked out to be a nice benefit. So that was cool.
Oh man.
Yeah. It was an interesting journey. So all those little things, all came into, months afterwards, as I'm making more prototypes and trying to get it ready for manufacturing and trying to refine everything.
Did you build the guitar that he played for Can't Stop Loving You? The one that had the piezo pickup in it?
Oh yeah. And he also used that in, I just came across it recently. He did this thing, him and Gary Sharon did this duet thing where, Eddie's playing and Gary's singing, and he's using that guitar. And I just saw that for the first time, I think maybe a month or two ago. It was very cool. I was really proud to see him use it on that. So that one, I was working on the prototypes. At this point, I was given the orders to have 6 prototypes ready for the summer NAMM show. And so that was in end of June or July. And so I'm crunching. I can't remember, because sometimes the NAMM show will be end of June, sometimes in July. I can't remember how this one played out, but I was already working on these prototypes. Then they said, you have to have them done for NAMM. So then I'm like, wow, this is going to be tough. So after the first week, and I'm making these 6 guitars, doing everything by hand, carving the tops and machining, the necks, the pickups, everything. After the first week, I go in that Sunday, and I work like 80 some hours the first week. Sunday morning, I'm looking at everything, assessing it, like, how much do I still have to do to get these done? Because they needed to be done to ship out, by the following Monday. But I had to have them done by Friday so they could ship out Monday. So they have to be done Monday. So Sunday, I'm like, I'm just going to have to stay up all night. So, like I said, the first week, it was, I think, 84 hours, the first week. Second week, I went in on a Sunday. That's when I determined I'm just going to have to stay up until these are done. Monday morning, I went home, took a shower, had breakfast, went back to work. And then my wife or my friends at work would bring me lunch and dinner. I would drink a coffee every hour until noon. Then I'd switch to Diet Dr. Pepper and drink one an hour and then continue that cycle. And then Thursday night, I get home, the guitars are done. It's 11 o'clock. So I didn't sleep. I literally didn't sleep. No exaggeration, no sleep from Sunday morning until Thursday night at 11 o'clock. That many days, no sleep. Running, copy routers and, Bridgeport mills and spraying and winding pickups. No sleep. I get home, I lay down, phone rings, and it's Eddie's former manager, Barbara. Hey, how are the guitars looking? I said, don't worry, they're all done. I just got them all done. They're all good to go. We'll be able to ship them out tomorrow, not Monday. She goes, oh, great. Well, you know what? We decided we're not going to show them at NAMM, but we'll let Eddie use them for testing, on the tour. It's just like, oh, it was like, are you shitting me? But it was fine, and actually that's really how it should have been. He had to road test them. So then he took them out on the balance tour. And then that piezo equipped one came around because that was one he didn't have, so he asked me to make a piezo equipped one. So I got the, I think it was the Mike Christian piezo bridge, which now I think Graphtec bought that technology. So they're like these Graphtec saddles with the piezo loaded saddles. So I got that and built up that prototype. And because of the crunch, I gave up my summer vacation over the 4th and postponed it. So then I rescheduled it for the end of the month. And then it turned out Eddie was playing Chicago, and that's where I'm from the Chicagoland area. So then I took the guitar with me, and then I gave it to him at that show. and so then he used it, and that was it, so that was cool. And in fact, Skid Row were opening for Van Halen at that show, and I met Snake in the band, and Snake's been a really good friend and a great player and supporter, so it's cool how, because of this project, you meet all these people and they become lifelong friends. It was a great experience. So we got the one, and then that was in end of July. And I think it was the World Theater. I forgot what that venue was called, and it's changed names a few times over the years. And then he would still every once in a while play the Music Man. And then I went out to Jones Beach and gave him the red prototype. And then I had to run out and go to a hardware store to find a Dremel tool because the pickups were still a little too high on that one. So I had to get a Dremel tool so I could route it and lower it. And that was a little bit of drama. And when I got back, I did the work, and then he had to run out and sound check, and Leslie West was there. So this was another great story. So here I'm all stressed out. I get the guitar modified. Okay, now he's going to take it out and try it on sound check. And now here's Leslie West. He's going to sit in with him at the show. And so he's going to sound check with him. So to see Eddie and the band play Mississippi Queen with Leslie West was just fantastic. I mean, just sound checking on that. And Leslie, it's his song, right? So here you have Leslie schooling Ed. No, it's like this. It's like this. And, he's just being like the taskmaster, and Eddie's laughing, because Eddie certainly knows how to play it, but Leslie's just being Leslie, and he's just trying to, impress upon the point, like, this is my song, listen to me, So Eddie was a good sport about it, and he was just kind of chuckling, and then they played it, ripped my head off, just an incredible version of Mississippi Queen. So that was a real treat. Yeah. So then he had that guitar, and then the funny part, that guitar, even after I modified, he's like, no, this guitar, no, it sucked. He was kind of complaining about it, and I was just crushed, And then
the red one
later,
pardon? Was it the red one? Was it the red one? The one that said Peavey Wolfgang? They had the decals on the bottom.
Yeah, it was the one that was the centerfold of the Guitar World magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So at Jones Beach, even after I modified it, he was kind of chastising me, like, nah, this is no good. And then a few weeks later, he plays in Atlanta. So I go out to Atlanta, and he goes, I don't know what it is with the red one, man. It's my favorite one. It goes from, being, no good one day to his favorite one the next time I see him. And then at that show, John Jorgensen was there from, at that time, he was from the Helicasters, but he was playing with Elton John, and they played the same venue the night before. And so he hung a day because Elton had the next day off. So John stayed to watch Eddie, so I was hanging in the guitar pit, with John Jorgensen, and telling him, about the guitar and the project. And I'm like, I'm crossing my fingers, he's still using that Music Man, on a song or two here and there. Hopefully, he'll finally be all using my guitars.
He had the logo covered up. The Music Man logo was covered.
At that time, he may have done that, yeah. But he was still using it for a song. And so then when it came time for the encore, the show is over. John spins me around, high fives me with both hands. He just goes, and then he grabs me. He's like, dude, you did it. He played your guitars all night. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So that was the first show that they were all my guitars, that Atlanta show on the Balance Tour. So that was a great memory.
Oh, wow.
And then having John Jorgensen there, made it really cool too, Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And then later I did that first piezo one was a Sunburst. And then that one was also the first hardtail, and it was because of that piezo bridge. So I did string through body, and then I did it like in a V formation, because it's V for Van Halen. So I did the eyelets in V formation, and then it also helped because now with that V, you had a more constant break angle across the bridge because of the radius of the bridge, and the V made it a more equal string break across the saddles. So that was another benefit of that. And then when it came time for a hardtail, then I said, hey, you got that hardtail piezo, non-trem. We need to do one for the product line. And And he didn't want to do it. He's like, well, I don't use them, except for the piezo. And I'm like, yeah, but I'd kind of like a hardtail. That's kind of my world. I mean, the Floyd is all cool and all, but I kind of prefer a hardtail myself. And I said, there's a lot of people like that, so I really kind of had to twist his arm to do that. And it was just impressing upon him. It was really for me, and this is part me too. So why don't we do it? So then he finally gave in and we did it. So I was thankful for that. And with that, another cool, kind of not happy accident, but the way it played out was I didn't want to have to design a different neck with a different pitch. Conventionally with a Les Paul style stop bar tailpiece and Tune-o-matic, you have to have more neck pitch, to allow adjustability on the bridge. So I didn't want to have to do that.
Like that.
There's there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
there you go.
So for that, since I didn't want to make two drastically different models, because you always have to think of manufacturing and making their life easier. So I then thought, well, I'll recess the bridge in the tailpiece. That way I can use the same neck and the same pitch. And then I got rid of the thumb wheels and just a hex brooch for adjusting the bridge. Yeah, there you are.
Okay. So that's why they're so recessed like that. You guys, this is amazing. We're learning so much stuff tonight. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Stuff we've wondered forever, man. Wow. I love the hardtail stuff. I've played the Peavey Wolfgang, the tremolo version, the hardtail version. And yeah.
They both have their place, and not everybody likes a Floyd, not everybody likes a fixed bridge, so I thought you really have to have both. And so I'm glad we did, and we made a lot of people happy by doing that. Obviously the Floyd Rose version, would outsell it because that's what he's known for and that's what most of his fans want. But there are a lot of fans who do like that hardtail. Oh yeah, that's the special with the hardtail that I forgot I even did.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't have one of those. I have a special, but not a hardtail. I have a couple hardtail with the contoured top, but not the flat top. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. I remember on it would have been the Van Halen 3 tour. I remember he played a special for his main guitar solo.
Yeah. Once we did the special, Eddie he's not one who likes all the fancy and the glitz and all that kind of stuff, right? So once we did the special, he really dug that and used it a lot. And for one, because it was the new toy, or the new girl in town, as us old guys like to say. It was the new thing, right? And so he really played it a lot. And then he was just trying to let people know that it's available. So it was kind of, his way of spreading the word that we're offering that too. But he genuinely did like both of them, he really used both of them a great deal. So, yeah.
Wasn't there a, I don't know if you had talked about this earlier, wasn't there like a mini one?
Oh yeah. So that mini one, the first one I did for Wolfie. So once I shifted gears and went to the full size, I quit working on that. And maybe, I don't know, 6-9 months or a year later, whenever, I finally finished it. And we had all, by this time, manufacturing or making the first of the production models. So at this point, he's only playing my prototypes. Now the factory makes the first batch of prototypes, or not prototypes, but production pilot run. So we plan to send the first, I think it was like 24 guitars to Eddie's house, the studio, so he could inspect them and make sure everything was up to snuff. So I flew out there so we could both open the guitars and inspect them, So I flew out there and we unbox them, we inspect them. And one little funny was after a few guitars, he picks it up, strums it. It's not in tune. And I said, well, yeah, it's shipped from Mississippi to California. It's not going to be in tune. And it's like, well, but it has a Floyd on it. And I said, well, yeah, but the wood is going to expand and contract. That's why necks are adjustable, necks move, they kind of settle, and all that. He's all, come on with the Floyd, you're telling me it can't stay in tune. And I go, no, I mean, you know what it's like. You're on tour, do you think your tech is going to tune your guitar, in one city and you're not going to have to tune it in another? I mean, come on. He's like, oh no, they should stay. This is leaving the factory. They need to stay in tune. And he tuned one up and then he went, bam. And we're sitting, like kneeling on the floor, passing the guitars back and forth. So we're both kneeling on the floor and he takes that guitar and he spikes it into the floor and he just embeds the strap pin into the body, because he spiked it so hard.
Oh my gosh. And
then he strummed it and it was still in tune. And he goes, well, see, I just did that and it's still in tune. And I said, well, yeah, but, come on, shipping a guitar across, the country, you can't expect it to be in tune. Well, I'll see what you can do about that. So then it was just going back, make sure the strings are stretched out, and then his way of life, we just, everything is dialed in and, leave no stone unturned, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But in that story, I think is where he later on, when he went to Fender, spun the tale of throwing a guitar across the room at a board meeting and all that stuff at Peavey, which that didn't happen. That was a complete fabrication. So I think he took that story of me being in his house and spiking it into the ground, and he spun that into being at a board meeting, throwing it across the room, and all this stuff. Peavey doesn't have a board. They don't have a board of directors. It's owned by Hartley. It's a big company, but that never happened. In fact, Hartley called me after that article came out. He's like, am I missing something? Did that? And I'm like, no, it didn't happen. You were there. I was there. It didn't happen. So yeah. Marketing.
Yeah.
So I finished the small one and bring it out with me to 5150. So then after we inspect the guitars, then, I said, hey, I brought this out for Wolfie, he's like, oh yeah, great. He plays it. And I did that same string through body, with the tune-o-matic thing, like I did on that first piezo. So he played it and he's like, oh yeah, cool. And then we hear Eddie and Val coming into the studio. And so he takes the guitar and he puts it in the gig bag and slides it behind the couch. And then here they come. And I'm like, all right, he's gonna, hey, well, look at this nice man brought for you, Wolfie. And they introduce us, and Wolfie runs to I think it was a pinball machine or whatever, playing for a while or some game, and talked to Val and, all this. And then they left. I'm like, he didn't give him the guitar. Then after they left, and he pulls it back out and he plays it and he goes, okay, now I want you to make me one with the Floyd. I'm like, okay. So I made him one with the Floyd. And so he never gave that to Wolfie. Wolfie has it now, but it was intended for Wolfie, but he kept it. And then later with Fender, then he used those little guitars, but he had the headstocks refinished with new artwork and cut out the scoop. But you can match up the flames. They're the guitars I made, but he just put new artwork on the headstock and cut the scoop out.
For little guitars. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I saw them twice on that tour, and on the huge jumbo screens, you could see it said Peavey on the Floyd. You could see that.
That's one little detail I didn't think to look at. I didn't look at that. I was looking at the flame, but yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they were those guitars, and then there was another. I just lost my train. There was another related story with the little guitars. Maybe it'll come to me. I can't remember. But yeah, that's how they went. And I know what it was. I know. Speaking of the scoop and cutting it out. So then we have the guitar done, and then we start talking about patents and all this kind of stuff. And so then, Ed wants his name on the patent, and I'm like telling Hartley, it's mine. It's not his. It's his name, but I designed it. His name doesn't need to be on the patent. I designed it. And so he's like, well, he really wants his name on the patent. And I'm like, I designed it. It's like, if I like one of his songs, is he going to put my name on one of his songs that he wrote? No, that's just not right. I designed it, So then we're going back and forth on that. And then I said, all right, tell you what, why don't we do two versions? We'll do the one we did, and we'll apply for patent for the outside shape of the headstock. and we'll apply for patent like we normally do. So it'll be in my name, assigned to Peavey. And then we'll do another version, and where that scoop is, we'll draw it out as if it was cut out. And then we'll apply for patent on that, and we'll put all three of our names. You'll be on there too, Hartley. It'll be Eddie, you, and me. That way, you and me can always tell the truth, because it's, you know, there's two people who are going to be able to back each other up, right? So then we applied for patent on that, and then assigned that to Eddie. And then Hartley's like, well, what if he breaks away from Peavey and he takes the headstock? And I go, that thing's ugly. Let him take it. And so that's what happened, you know. So that's why the Thunder has that.
With
so
the
I
scoop
just signed
cut
that
out.
while I was at Peavey, yeah.
Yeah.
Before it was even in production, you know, that all went down.
What about, real quickly, those heads? You guys, this is awesome. Smash that thumbs up, you guys. We got 41 thumbs. We got about 107 watching right now. You guys are awesome. I remember seeing a poster. I think it was like a Guitar World, where there was like when the Peaveys first came out, and the scoops had like color in them.
Oh yeah. Originally, I wanted to color match them, and Ed was on board with that too. You know, we both thought it looked really cool, color matching the scoop. And then once we were getting it ready for manufacturing, then some of the manufacturing people piped up, which rightly so. They said that's going to be a big can of worms, trying to coordinate matching the scoops with, you know, 6 different necks with 6 different bodies. Logistically, that's a tall order for any manufacturing plant. You know, that's,
you have to match them all up eventually. You can't just like slap.
And you know, the way things work in manufacturing, sometimes it's hard to keep things matched up, or, you know, you'd have to make a certain quantity of necks and a certain quantity of bodies, and sometimes even that is hard to manage, right? So I think it was like the first 6 prototypes had that, and then after that, then I quit. In fact, but wait, there's more.
Uh-oh.
Here we are.
Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. So yeah, it's the color of the body. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
cool. So that's it. So that's the match, you know, the yellow, the amber headstock to match the body. So this is literally not counting that first guitar that he took on the plane. This is the first neck. So this is really the first finished neck that I made.
Oh, wow.
But it has the carbon fiber and the compound radius. And then after that, then we determined, you know, and I think it coincided. Maybe the first batch of prototypes might have all had the compound with the color match. And then that was a feature. Again, manufacturing were saying the compound would have caused more complexity than they wanted to take on at that time with a new model and all that. So we gave up on the compound radius fingerboard and the matched scoop. And then this was one of the first 2 amber bodies that I did. So then when he was at the factory, he picked up both of them, and this one weighed a little bit more than the other one. And so he said, tell you what, just, you know, because he wanted one of each of the colors for the tour. So I said, I'll take this one. I'm like, you don't want me to finish this other one? And so he said, no, it weighs more than the other one, and I just want one of each for the tour, so you keep that one. So he let me have this one.
Oh,
so that's cool. And then later on, you know, and I didn't finish it out at the time. Then later on, once we put new necks on, I made new necks to replace all his prototype necks that had the color match scoop. Then I took that first neck and put it on this body. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Wow.
This one, I even had copper shielding paint on the inside. And for whatever reason, he didn't want to do that. Yeah. So he felt, you know, and I don't need that. It's quite enough. You don't need to do that. So that was another thing, how things develop and play out.
Yeah, stuff that always slight changes and
then the binding, you know, and everything I made was always real binding, and then later on production, then it was an epoxy poured binding. So we would make the body blanks and then fixture them on the CNC machines, with locator pins, and route out a channel for the binding, and then fill it with cream or black epoxy, let it dry, and then the next day put it back on the machine and then finish machining out the body. So it was, unique. Hartley wanted to do it that way. And, but for me, for making prototypes, I couldn't do it that way. I use real binding, it's just, I could do that. I wasn't going to do the epoxy for prototypes.
Yeah.
Let's see what else is interesting with this one. Originally, I wanted to use, the Gibson amber top hat knobs and the cream switch cap. I wanted to kind of make it a little more Gibson-y, but he preferred the Strat knobs because he liked the knurl, the spline on the knob was a little more secure for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then this particular Floyd was before we had the block Peavey logo on them. Some of the early ones may have had like the lightning bolt Peavey logo, but some of them were just blank with no logo at all.
Oh, on the prototypes?
Yeah. And then this one has an aluminum block because the original production pieces, at least during prototype, had a die-cast zinc block. So we were experimenting with different tones. This one just happened to be aluminum, but we ultimately decided on brass. So I just let this one since it was unique. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then typically most prototypes I would do for him, I would never install the tremolo cover because he always took them off. He just said it would sag and get in the way, so he just preferred them without the cover.
Mm-hmm.
So what else was interesting?
That's cool. What about the pickups? Like how were the pickups? I mean, to my ears, I always thought the Peaveys were hotter than the Ernie balls.
Yeah, they were different. We couldn't, and I know Larry DiMarzio and Steve Blucher at DiMarzio. I've known them for years, and they're good people. So, in fact, in this guitar, I have the DiMarzio pickups. I called up Larry and Steve, and they sent me down the pickups. So those are the DiMarzio Van Halen pickups.
Oh, wow.
So then I just assumed that's what we were going to put in the guitar because he already did that and already did it with DiMarzio. And then Hartley said, no, we're Peavey Electronics. We make pickups. We want to put our pickups in Ed's guitar. So then we talked to Eddie, and Eddie's like, well, can you do it? And I go, well, Hartley's telling me I need to do it, so let's see what we can do. So then I just spec'd out his pickups and then kind of came out with my version of what I thought to get it in the similar realm, right? Put him in guitar, gave it to him, takes it out on the tour, and then he'd call back or send a fax at that time or whatever and say, it needs a little of this or it needs a little of that. So we went through maybe a half a dozen different sets over a month or so. And every time he'd say, no, it needs this. And then I'd wind it to get a little more warmth or a little more high end or whatever he was telling me at the time. And I'd take it in that direction. And we're doing this circle. And it was kind of methodical because everything he'd ask, I give it to him. And we kept on doing this. And finally, I took that first set of pickups I gave to him and sent them back to him. And he goes, that's it. So that's how that went down. And then when I was at Fender, Fender got me to help, get Eddie over there. And I was based here in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to move to California, which is a whole nother story. So, but I gave him a lot of information on the guitar. And I was the one who gave him the idea that there's no way you're going to steal Eddie from Peavey. They're already making his amp and his guitar. And like, oh, come on, if it was your company, what would you do? And I go, you can't top that. Come on, think about it. What could you possibly do? And I thought about it and I go, the only thing you could possibly do to top what Peavey already did was give him his brand. It couldn't be the Fender Van Halen model. It would have to be presented as the Van Halen brand. So that's what they did. So, Yeah.
Wow.
And then I told him what I did on the pickups. So the pickups are the same whine, for the Fender. And then later on, then they offered an Alnico 2 instead of Alnico 5, which I used. And so Alnico 2 will be a little weaker and a little bit warmer sounding. But otherwise, it's the same wire. Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah, I told him what it was. It's not like a big, if you know how to make pickups, you can figure that stuff out. But I told him what it was anyway, so they just copied that. And then later on, initially they had Alnico 5, and then later on they did Alnico 2. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't realize you worked for Fender.
Yeah, I was at Fender. I left Peavey in 2000, April of 2000. Went to Fender shortly after that until June of 2011 when I started at Gibson.
Oh.
Yeah.
What were you doing at Fender?
So I was hired as senior master builder in Nashville. And at that time, it was Custom Shop East. And so some of my first projects, I had to make these 21 guitars for Garth Brooks for his Chris Gaines persona, because he was doing this Chris Gaines album where he was going to be remarketing himself as a rock artist, right? And so he drastically changed his look and his music and all this stuff. And he was just trying to, come out with this alternate career. And so I made these 21 tellies with this Mylar covering the face of the guitar. And it was literally the same Mylar that they used on the CD for the Chris Gaines CD. So it was like this multicolor prism line thing. And I found the company that made the Mylar. I had to do all this research from the record company and found this place. It was actually in Chicago Heights, Illinois, where I was born. And they made the Mylar. So I got a roll of that. And it was, I think, a half of 1,000th thick, half of 1,000th. I mean, it was like an eighth of the thickness of a sheet of paper. It was very, very thin. And I had to use a spray booth and isolate it so no breeze. Because in a regular room like this, if I took a sheet of that Mylar and just held it up like this sheet of paper, it would be doing that just because of the residual, breeze that you take for granted coming from like AC or heat or whatever. So I had to have this isolated room and adhere this stuff to the top. So that was a interesting project at Fender. And then Dan Smith wanted me to move out there. So I was in R&D for like 2 years, commuting between Fender in Nashville and Corona. And then ultimately turned that down, which is a big soap opera. We don't have enough time for this show.
Next time.
And that wasn't a very popular thing for me to do, but it was the right thing for me to do. And so, for my family and everything. So I stayed here, and then I had the opportunity with Gibson in 2011, and then started there, and I've been here ever since. And since my first guitar was a Gibson, I feel like I'm home. It was meant to be.
That's amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And really quickly, is this the Garth Brooks? Is that the guitar?
Yeah, that's it. That's that prism thing. Yeah, if you get up on it,
that's him.
There's kind of a grid, but then you see all these squiggly prismatic lines and stuff in there. And then I did like a silver burst around the seam around the rim. And then, hey, after this program, send me a copy of that. I'd like to have that. I don't have that photo.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, 21 of them. And those were like stocking stuffers for the band and his staff. I think they were probably $2,500 guitars, his cost, and we made 21 of them. And then I think the real Christmas presents were like BMWs or Mercedes that year for everyone. And that was like the stocking stuffer. He's a very nice guy.
That's amazing.
The year before, he gave them all houses. Yeah.
Wow.
Part of that one.
Well, yeah, so that was a real interesting project. And I like those kind of, out of the ordinary challenges,
Yeah. I had no idea that you were at Fender, because that's kind of how I got my start, was with all the people who work out of Fender and Fender Custom Shop. And you mentioned Dan
Yeah.
Smith, and Jason Smith is a friend of mine, his dad.
Yeah.
So I had no idea. That's so cool.
Yep. Yeah. So
Was it?
at this point, I feel like I'm home, and
Yeah.
like again, my first guitar was that SG, and I'm here. So that's very cool.
That's so cool. Is there any other guitars that people would be surprised to know that you worked on? Like any specific projects?
Well, a couple, not as far as like, I'm sure there's design things, but like some of the cool things like that may many people may not know. I worked on Randy Rhoads guitars 2 months before he passed away. So being that I was in Chicago, and Bruce Boland was, I didn't realize it at the time, but Ozzy's people reached out to Gibson and said, hey, do you know anyone in the Chicago area? So he recommended me at the store. So then I went to the Rosemont Horizon and worked on Randy's Polka Dot V and Charbel and his Les Paul. Les Paul just was set up and it was buzzy. He wanted me to refret it, but I couldn't do it overnight. And then the Polka Dot V I worked on at the show, and he was having trouble keeping the vibrato, because this is before Floyd Rose's. So I did this hidden knife edge, which is later what Paul Reed Smith did on his guitar. So it was a hidden knife edge. So what I did, I took the 6 screws out of the Floyd, or not Floyd, but the Fender style. It was actually a brass like Mighty Mite or whoever, aftermarket tremolo. And I took the screws out and I put them in a hand drill, and I took a triangle file and filed a V notch in 2 of them, and put 2 of them back in on the outside by each E string. And then I left the 4 out. That way it just pivots on those 2. And I got that cue from Leo, because Leo did that on G&Ls at that time. So I took that concept and did that hidden knife edge, but Leo's wasn't hidden, but this was hidden just by default of those stock Strat style screws. And then I deburred the base plate and the block and the saddles and all that stuff, and filed the nut, lubed it all and all that stuff. And he used it for the show, and it stayed in tune. He used it on his solo. At the end of the solo, he hit an A chord, and it was in perfect tune. It was awesome. Then he went into Suicide Solution, and it was great, man. I was in the clouds. It was fantastic. And then afterwards, he's like, you're taking my white Charbel home and doing the same thing to that. So I took it home and took it to the shop the next day, and I had to get back to him that afternoon, like at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, because they were leaving. And so I did the same thing, but I could only do so much because it has that hockey stick headstock. And with that extreme brake angle, you can only hope for so much, without a lock nut. So all the work, he passed, unfortunately 2 months after that. And all the guitars now, when Fender reissued them, I think they did a reissue of his White Jackson in 2010, somewhere around there, or 11. And they copied all the work I did. And then for their reissue, and then his guitars are still intact. His family owns them. Yeah. So they're still intact. The Polka Dot and the White V are still intact with the work I did. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud that I've been, great friends with Rudy Sarzo ever since. So 40 years or over 40 years later. In fact, happy birthday, Rudy.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Rudy's my brother. It's his birthday today. Yeah. Got to give Rudy a shout out.
I saw that online too. And where is that? He posted a photo. I'm sure you saw that.
Yeah, I saw one he posted this morning where he had the gray hair and beard and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there he is, man.
That's it. Wolfman Rudy.
I'll have to send you some of my uncle's pictures. He photographed Ozzy with Randy and Rudy back in 1981.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Another cool thing at that show in Chicago, the show I did. So I had all access, laminate pass and all that stuff. And I was working on the guitar in the dressing room, and it was a great experience. It really was. Being, I was only 18. I graduated when I was 17. This was the following year. I was 18, working on Randy's guitars. Imagine that. I'm 18. But he was only 24, 25. And years later, I was talking to Rudy about it, and I go, man, I was only 18, and you guys were letting me work on Randy Rhoads guitars. I mean, I was just a kid. And Rudy's like, we were all kids. We were, you know. But at that point, I was working at the store for 3 years, you know, and I was serious into it. And I look back on everything I did for Randy. I wouldn't change one thing. I'm very proud of what I did on those guitars, and they stood the test of time, you know. So I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
That's one. And then another one is Prince. One of Prince's when he was going as the artist formerly known as, and he had that squiggly looking, you know, cymbal guitar, dollar sign or whatever it was. I guess he had a bad day one day, and he took the guitar off at the end of a song and he threw it down, and it busted into 4 pieces. And so it was actually one of Eddie's techs was teching for Prince at the time, I believe. So he sent it to me at Peavey. So I spent literally a full week, 40 hours reconstructing that guitar, refinishing it, doing the fretwork, you know, because I had to overspray the entire guitar. And so
like one of those?
It was the black one. So they're the one I repaired. So that the arm on the bottom, that long squiggly thing, was broken into 3 pieces. And then I think the top part was also busted off too. So I glued that all together, and then I drilled holes and used carbon fiber rods to reinforce it so it wouldn't break. And then it was black with this heavy gold flake, like dune buggy kind of flake. So to do the repair and touch it up, I ended up going to an auto store and finding 2 different sizes of flake. And initially I tried fogging in that big flake, but it was hard to match it up right. So I got it the closest I could, and then I got some of that finer flake, and then I stood back in the spray booth and just kind of fogged it over with that smaller flake, and that just kind of blended it all together. And then, you know, I was able to buff it out and reassemble it. And it turned out it was very cool. So those are 2 kind of cool things that many may not know. And then another cool one was here. I did this clear lucite guitar for Lady Gaga, and
I've seen that.
Yeah, so our artist relations contact Peter Leinheiser had this idea because he got this Philips LED light strip stuff, you know, at his house, and he thought it would be really cool and far out to put it in a guitar. So we talked about, you know, how that could be possible. So it started out trying to get it done for the Super Bowl, and I couldn't get it done in time for that. And then it was the Grammys, and I was still trying to work it out. And then all of a sudden, Beyonce couldn't make Coachella. So Gaga got pulled in to headline Coachella. So then I was able to have it done for that. And then I made a backup and then went out to Coachella, and I was on the stage while she was playing it for tech support in case something happened. So that was super exciting. And it was just a crazy project because I had to figure out a way to inlay this light strip. And it was very cool because you could change the color with your cell phone. You had this app from Philips. Yeah. So I'm in the guitar pit while she's playing, and the tech is changing the color of the guitar while she's playing it. And then they surprise me. One of the dancers runs over to the tech, and he hands the dancer the phone, and then the dancer runs out and gives it to Lady Gaga. And then she, you know, after that song, she goes, "Hey, everybody, let me show you what this guitar can do. I just got this guitar," and she has the phone, and she's changing the color, showing the audience what it can do, just to surprise me. So that was very cool. So I'm very proud of that one. That was a great project, and to be there and experience it and witness it was pretty heavy, you know. That was cool. And I have to say, you know,
wow,
she played the guitar on a song called Ayo, and it was very commendable. If you listen to the studio version of it, it's very different than what she does live. And that seeing that show, her show at Coachella, was just a real awakening, you know, because it made me realize the importance of guitar. I mean, I know what the importance of guitar is, but when you hear her record, she makes a record and they produce it so it's popular on the radio or streaming or whatever she's doing, right? But when she's playing a show, she's playing a rock show. And her two guitar players, I'll put those two guitar players up with any rock or heavy metal guitar player you want to put them up against. They are fine guitar players and they're rocking. Yeah, that's the guitar.
That's the guitar.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, I want one of those.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
And so her guitar players are fantastic. And then and her tech even said she does the arrangements and kind of tells them, the arrangements to do, but they're great guitar players and super nice guys. But she came out, she played that and she arranged that song such as, if you hear the studio cut is great, but the version she did at Coachella, it's as if Led Zeppelin played it. The guitar parts that she was playing, it's like something Jimmy Page would have played. It was pretty cool. Yeah. So I was, kind of, and then during the whole show, her two guitar players are just rocking out. I mean, it was a heavy metal show for real. I mean, it was heavy. It was rocking, man. And that to me told me she's smart enough to know you make a record as a record should be. It has to be produced to be relative for that point in time. Yeah. But when you put on a rock show, people want to be entertained. When they see a show, they want loud screaming guitars and they want a rock show. And that's what she gave them. So that was cool. That was a great experience. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, yeah. So those are three cool out of the ordinary things.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that guitar looks cool, man. So it changes colors. Like you change with the app.
Cool thing, it was 24 volt powered, so that was a challenge. So I had a good friend and coworker who was a electrical engineer who came from Crown and some other companies. So as I'm working on this, he had this concept to do this voltage multiplying circuit, and so I was able to take two 3.7 volt batteries, rechargeable, like people use in vapes and those sort of things. And I used two of those batteries and was able to scale up the voltage to turn those two 3.7 volt batteries into 24 volts. And it had enough current to power this guitar. And then I made this battery pack that went on the strap, like a wireless would. And then I had the power wire fished through the strap, and then it connected like in the back of the neck joint. And then the neck pickup on that guitar is really a dummy pickup. And it's basically a Gibson humbucking cover with the circuitry for the light system inside that humbucking cover. And then the power goes into that pickup to power that whole system.
Oh, no way.
Wow.
Yeah, there it is, green. Yeah.
There it is.
You're giving me ideas.
And it really
I'm working on an LED project, and I'm like, lights are going off over here.
Lights take a little bit of that, but when you see it where it's darker, it really lights up and glows. But either way, it looks cool, and she dug it, and it was a cool project, so I was proud of that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen you post about it before, and so I knew about it, but I didn't know about that part. Yeah.
I didn't know about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was one. It took, like I said, over a couple of months, and I probably had 80 hours in it. I mean, there's a lot of time in that guitar. And
was it just the one? Was it just the one guitar?
And the second one was quicker, but the second one still probably took me, a full week, at work, putting it together and doing all the electronics and all that stuff. Even though I knew what to do, it was still very involved. And working with those lights, you had to kind of slice them and cut them. And it was and I ruined a couple strands figuring out how to alter them to get them to fit in there. So it was kind of tricky, and that's where the challenges were with that. But yeah, it was cool. And then the funny part, they flew me out there for tech support, and I didn't know it until afterwards when my friend Peter informed me. He said, yeah, you were out there for tech support, but the irony is that if her main guitar, that first one you gave her, went down, that second one wouldn't have worked because it would have had to been paired with the phone that she was using. So really, I was just there for just to be there, I guess. I couldn't have done anything, you know. Been too late at that point, but I was there and it was cool.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's kind of like, I've got this thing back here called the Guitar Moire. It's where I've got like a bunch of my guitars live back here, and I have a similar. I have a similar type of thing where I can like do all the lights.
Yeah,
I can
there
change
you go.
all.
Yeah.
I can change all the cut. Like I can do everything.
Is that Phillips
You know.
or who's is that?
Yeah, Philips Hue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I used.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're I've got 3 of them. Yeah, I've got 3 of them all in there, and I can actually we have it where the channel gets donations to help support the channel, and any of those trigger that, and it automatically changes to whatever the donation is. But I can also from here I can like do everything myself. But I love these things.
Yeah.
I love these
exactly
things.
What I used, the Philips Hue.
To have that in a guitar, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was in when was that? 17 maybe? 2017, give or take, somewhere around then. 16 or 17. It was man, it was a great experience. And Coachella, there was 120,000 people there that year, and I was never around that many people in my life. I've been to big concerts, you know, throughout my life.
Yeah.
And I'd follow the fence line because I was that scared. Like, I'm not going to get too deep in these people and get lost or not be able to get back. But I might get 100 yards out, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going back. You know, it was pretty intimidating. It was cool. Yeah.
Wow. Coachella. Dang. Well, look at this. We're over 2 hours, and
time flies.
We told you.
Yeah.
Well, we had said the first 4 hours just flies by. It's after that.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I don't know, Amanda, if you have any questions. I know there's tons of questions in the chat here. There's so many things, but I mean, see, this is when I start feeling bad, because Amanda and I, we're both in California, so it's only 7:00 here.
Yeah.
But I know it's later. It's later where you are.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at some of the questions here to see if I can catch anything. A lot of nice comments.
Oh yeah, a lot of. Oh yeah, David Allen Wright is here, or was here. He was in the chat. Oh, there he is. David Allen Wright is here. Hey, man.
Hey, David.
Yeah, David's a great dude. He's awesome.
Oh, here I have some of these questions that Amanda had.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at.
You answered
those.
a lot of them. I can.
Yeah, we touched off on a lot of them, right?
Yeah. Here's one. What are some of your favorite artists that you've been able to build for?
Most recently, I'm very proud. I made a couple of the Ukraine half yellow, half blue guitars for Paul McCartney, and being a big Beatle fan, and he's my favorite. You know, he's actually. I know this is a Van Halen show, and I love Eddie, and I love Van Halen. But Paul McCartney's my hero. He's my number one. So to make a guitar for him was a dream come true. And I actually made him a few. I made a Casino and a Les Paul. And the Les Paul just was auctioned off for Ukraine support. He used it in a show and then signed it and auctioned it last weekend. And I think it brought in like $76,800 or something like that. So that was very cool. And then the Casino, he decided he wanted to keep, which is very cool. And big long story on that. I was out of town for work, and then when I got a call that I had to deliver these guitars to Paul in Knoxville. So I said, well, I can do that, but I'll be home tomorrow. And the way it played out, I went from the airport to our headquarters, picked up the guitars because they had to be shipped back to me. Then I went on vacation in Georgia to a resort, I took the guitars with me and then cut my vacation short and drove up to Knoxville and gave him the guitars, or gave his personal assistant the guitars. He was on strict COVID lockdown. So while I was on vacation, I took the casino and turned it upside down because it was, left-handed. And so then I had to learn Sgt. Pepper's upside down, the chords and the leads upside down, and take a video just for myself. But I was very proud of that. And it's like one of those kind of things, learning how to play something upside down and backwards. So I learned how to play Sgt. Pepper and took a video, and then showed his tech the video. I was very proud of it. Like, you'll have to indulge me. I got to show you this. So I did that. So I'm very proud that Paul decided to hang on to that guitar. So yeah, I was very proud of that. That's a cool one. But I've done guitars for, man, so many people, Eddie and Randy, of course. And, I've made some for Billy Gibbons, here at Gibson, Dave Mustaine and Rex Brown, and just countless, Adam Jones. There's so many of them. I need to really make a list, for all these years, you would think I would have a list. I need to make a list. So, because at some point I'm going to be even older and more forgetful, and I need to have this documented. Billy's a great guitar player and a great guy. Let's see, man, there's Steve Cropper. He was another fantastic one. I was able to do work for James Burton and Reggie Young, and Reggie Young, and Scotty Moore. So all three of Elvis's primary guitar players I did work for. So that was cool. I got to do work for them over the years. Who else? I don't know. There's just too many. It's hard for me to, I guess I'm getting too old. Let me see if I've been doing this for 43 years now. So
I have Billy Gibbons' business card here, and it always cracks me up because it says friend of Eric Clapton. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that just shows you what a humble guy he really is. You know what I mean? It truly is. I mean, it's a funny joke, and it shows that he's a humble guy, because he's respecting Eric like that. And Billy is, an awesome guy. He's an awesome guitar player and, celebrity in his own. But it just shows you, how nice and humble a guy he is, I just saw him and Jeff Beck here in town at a venue. Actually, the venue is like 5 minutes from my house. This new First Bank Amphitheater. It's a fantastic venue, and Billy and Jeff put on a fantastic show. It was incredible. It was the fifth time I saw Jeff, and I think the second or third time I saw Billy. Yeah, it was great.
That's amazing. I haven't seen UTOP yet, but I live vicariously through my uncle, who was a concert photographer. So he got to photograph and see them back in, I think, 79. So I always look through all his photos. Yeah. And so awesome.
All right. You'll appreciate this one. Here's another great story too. So when I'm working on Randy's guitars, right? Mm-hmm. I had the full access pass. I could go anywhere. Yeah. Except Ozzy and Sharon's dressing room. But I stayed in the dressing room with Randy and the band. And then I could walk out on the stage or backstage or anywhere in the audience I wanted to. So at a certain point in the show, I decided to walk out front, and I walk, basically right front center of the show, the venue. And I felt like Bill and Ted's Wayne's World. Although this was many years before Wayne's World. But you know how Wayne's World, they're like, showing their backstage pass, like I have credentials. So I did that, and I had my credentials, and so the usher's like, okay, you can go there. So Ozzy does the thing where he picks up Randy by the leg, and there's this picture like on the cover of the tribute record.
Yes.
I didn't know, and I saw it happen, and then over the years I see numerous pictures of that. But Rudy told me many years later that iconic picture on the cover of that tribute record is the one from Chicago. And I was standing behind Paul Natkin, who took the picture, I was like 8 feet behind him, and I'm like, come on, dude, out of my way. I'm trying to see, you know, but he got that picture right there, and I was 8 feet behind him. So that was pretty cool. And that is, I mean, that's just an iconic picture.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I actually lived in Chicago or outside of Chicago for about a year. I was just working out in Chicago, so I'm very aware of like all the areas you're talking about. Even though I grew up in Michigan, I would
Yeah.
just drive through Indiana all the time. Yeah. So everything you're saying, I'm like, wow, I remember going there all the time.
It was a good place. I mean, it was you know, I grew up there and until I was 25 to go to Peavey. And
Mhm.
you know, it's at that time you saw so many shows, and you know, it was a great place to grow up. In fact, this leads into another one of your questions. You know, I saw a question: did I ever see, or when was the first time? Obviously, I saw Van Halen many times, but the very
Mhm.
first time I saw him was April 25th, 1980, on the Women and Children First Tour, and that was at
April
the
25th.
amphitheater in Chicago. So that was very cool.
My uncle photographed them the next day in Detroit, and they played
Oh,
2
wow.
nights. So we photographed them on the 26th and the 27th. So
Yeah,
I'll have to send you those. Yeah.
that's very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was the first time I saw him, and then you know, when I was working with him, I must have gone to probably 15, 20 shows, you know, throughout, you know, the Balance and the Van Halen 3 tours and stuff. So yeah, it was cool, you know. And what was really cool, what impressed me so much was how personable they all were. And you know, I was there for work for Eddie, right? But him
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
Alex shared a dressing room, and then Sammy and, you know, Michael shared a dressing room, right? So I figured, you know, I'll be hanging with these guys. Those guys are probably not going to give me the time of day. That's not how it happened. Those guys were just so personable and so nice. Michael and Sammy were both, I mean, cannot say enough good about both of those guys. They, hey, Jim, how you doing? How's your flight in? How's the family? It's just super genuinely nice guys. Yeah. They didn't have to be. I mean, I would expect, especially Sammy being the lead singer and the front man and all that stuff. I figured he'd probably like, you know, not give me the time of day, but man, super, super nice guy. Yeah. Can't say enough good about both of those guys.
Yeah.
And I
I
have to say too, at that time during the Balance tour, they wouldn't sound check together, which is kind of odd. So Eddie and Michael and Alex, and then Fitz Gerald
oh,
keyboards. He was
Night
behind the
Ranger.
stage. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was
Mhm.
behind the stage playing keyboards. And so that's another interesting thing. Not a lot of people know that, but he was actually the one playing all the keyboards, you know, even when Eddie would be pretending it would be Alan behind the stage. But, you know, you have to expect that because it's a big production, you know, and while Eddie does it on the record, you know, you couldn't expect him to do all that. But so they would all sound check together. And I don't know why it went down like this. And then Sammy would be by himself and he'd come out with an acoustic and sound check the acoustic and sing, and then pull out an electric and sound check and sing with the electric. And when he lets go on electric, and he's never done this, but he could be frontman, singer, and guitar player in a power trio and pull it off magnificently. He's an incredible guitar player. He really is.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of, I don't know if he's too humble or he just doesn't want the extra burden when he's fronting the band, but he's that legit as a guitar player. He's really good. Yeah. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, on all the old Montrose stuff, Bad Motor Scooter and Rock Candy and all that, he wrote the riffs and he actually placed the lap steel on Bad Motor
Yeah.
Scooter and he did a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. He brought that back out on tour one year, the lap steel, and used it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a
Mm-hmm.
great experience. And then with Sharon on the 3 tour, you know, I think he got a bad rap, you know how fans they can be, you know, just like we know the Sam and Dave thing. And then you
Mm-hmm.
add Gary to it and, you know, he just got torn up, you know. And really, you know, you go back and listen to that Van Halen 3 record and it's really a good record, you know. Uh but at the time, you know, it I guess wasn't well received just because it was a third person, you know. But it was cool.
It was.
Yeah.
I really consider that like Edward's like his solo album. You know, because he
Yeah,
did a
because he
lot
kind
of
of produced it, and it was more his thing.
stuff. And did you like did you build like special instruments or guitars for him for that record?
Well, I was
Do
still,
you remember?
during that time, I was making things. I made him three double necks, and he never took them out live, but I made him three double necks. And,
Peavey
but other
Wolfgang double
than that,
necks?
yeah, yep. Two of
Yeah,
them
we never
were,
never saw those.
two of them were baritone on top with a six string on the bottom. And then one of them was a 12 string on top with a six string on the bottom. Yeah.
Wow.
And then the baritones had to be like, because he liked the Dan Electro Tic Tac basses, six string basses,
Yeah.
like short scale. So he wanted it to sound like the Dan Electro Tic Tac bass, but he wanted it to sound like the Wolfgang guitar. So the double neck was, half hollow and half solid. So it would sound like the Dan Electro on that half and like the Van Halen on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting project.
Amazing.
But yeah, three of them.
Wow.
Let's see what else.
Cool.
Wow. Did you guys get? I'm sorry. Did you get the G. Butchnoff question? He did a. Hey Jim, Goto Trems on the Peavey Wolfgangs? Question mark.
No, those are pings. We use ping. Pingwell is a Korean company that make a lot of hardware for a lot of different manufacturers. In fact, they make Grover tuners that we all know and love. Grover tuners are made by Ping, and they made the vibratos for Peavey and the Peavey tuners for the other models. However, on the Van Halen, we went with the Schallers, but our other hardware was all Ping. They're a big hardware supplier in the industry.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I used to work at a. You ever heard of a shop called Subway Guitars in Berkeley?
Yeah, Fat Dog.
I used to work there in the '90s. Fat
No
Dog,
kidding.
and I used to throw weird guitars together, and yeah, we used Ping stuff and talk about that Dan Electro stuff. That was the play. He had all that stuff, man.
Is he still in business?
Yeah,
I need to call him. Is he still own it?
yeah. I'll give you his phone number.
Do that.
He called me. He called me about a year ago. He wanted to get together, so I'll give you his
I'd
number.
like to talk to him again. I met him in 89 or 90. I have a friend. I'm really a big passion of mine is pre-war Delta blues, and so Robert Johnson and Son House and Charlie Patton and all that. So a blues researcher friend of mine, Gail Dean Wardlow, who wrote several books and the most recent, most definitive Robert Johnson biography. It's a great book. He took me to the dedication of the first Robert Johnson tombstone or monument, and Fat Dog was there. So I met him there. So that was very cool. So we had a lot of good conversation at dinner and stuff. But yeah, I'd like to meet up with him again.
Wow.
Or at least talk to him.
Oh, I'll give you his number, man. Yeah, him and I, we're actually neighbors, believe it or not. I live in Santa Cruz area. We both live in like literally blocks away, and I never see him. But the shop up in Berkeley. Did you ever visit his shop?
No, I never
on Cedar
had the
Street in Berkeley.
But I do love the absurd, and I know he was a merchant in that.
The stuff.
A lot of wacky builds and stuff like that. I just thought it was all fabulous.
Yeah, a lot of crazy stuff. But yeah, the Dan Electro stuff, dude. I mean, before the stuff was being reissued. I mean, back in the day, like the what do you call it? The Masonite bodies or whatever, like all that stuff.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that stuff. In the music store I grew up working at, anytime they would get any Dan Electro or Silvertone, Dan Electro stuff in on trade, they just give it to me because they didn't want to stink up the store. They just thought it was garbage. It was before they were cool, And so I probably have a dozen of those things, that they just left for dead. Just, I'll give it to Jim. He'll take it. So they're cool, They have a lot of virtue. Even though they were budget guitars, they're still cool in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know Edward had a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah.
Like in some of the photos, you see them like the Silvertones and
then Randy's Polka Dot V, Carl Sandoval made the body, but he used a Dan Electro neck.
Oh.
That's what's on that. And then he grafted some wood to have that like V kind of shaped headstock, but that's a Dan Electro neck. That's why if you look at the inlays, they're bow ties like Randy's motif. But if you look at the center of the bow tie, it's the stock white acrylic, and then the other part of the bow tie is mother of pearl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Man. Well, any more questions? See, now I feel really bad because I had said an hour, 2 hours tops. Now we're 2.5.
We'll ask
2.5.
we'll ask 1 or 2 more questions. How about that?
All right.
Okay.
The wrap up. What would you tell someone trying to get into the guitar industry?
Main thing, it's hard. I mean, everyone has their own path, you know, and my path, while it's like, again, my 43rd year and it's worked out for me, but it was a difficult journey. It wasn't, you know, easy. It's almost like trying to be a professional musician or a rock star. You know, it's a long journey. It's not an easy thing. So you have to follow your passion and you have to want to do it. And it has to be your life. You know, you just have to commit to it and be into it. That's the key thing. If you want to do it, and it really, you look at all our, you know, heroes and whether they're musicians or actors and actresses, the people who are successful like that are the people who just have that passion and just commit to doing it. And sometimes you're eating peanut butter and jelly or ramen, and sometimes you're eating filet mignon or whatever, you know, fancy stuff. You know, I mean, you just have that journey. You just have to have the passion and commit to it. That's the key. Yeah.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then what's something you know now in your career that you wish you knew when you started?
Well, one, you know, while we have our heroes and I'm guilty like everyone else, putting them up on a pedestal, just realize they're all people, you know, just treat them like people, you know. If you treat them like people, they're going to be people back. Very cool, you know. If you put them up on a pedestal and treat them like that, then sometimes they feel uncomfortable or they'll kind of react, you know. So just treat them like people, you know. That's one thing I've learned. And oh, yeah, that's probably, I don't know. There's not really any secrets or any nuggets that, you know, were like this revelation, you know. It's just been, like I said, like a long journey. You just have to commit and treat people how they want to be treated. And I do that at the factory, you know, like for instance, today I gave Brad Paisley the tour, right? And it was the first time I met him, but I just pretended like I knew him. Obviously I didn't. Yeah, obviously he knew we never met, but I just talked to him like anybody else. And he was a super nice guy, super personable. And he got into, interesting story, he got into working on guitars, like refinishing, which is no easy task. But that was his big project during the pandemic, during the COVID shutdown, because he's cooped up at home and he had some guitars that he didn't like to finish on. And so he got, yeah, there he is. So he got into refinishing his guitars and then that's like his big passion. And so during the tour, he's like, you know, when we're in finishing and prep and all that, he's like, well, what kind of wood filler do you use? And how do you sand it? You know, he was asking some really cool questions, you know, which really showed that he's serious about it and, you know, has enough knowledge, you know, and experience, you know, so that was cool. So yeah, just treat people like that, you know. So that's about it. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all people.
Yeah.
Everybody.
My dad always taught me the same thing because he started off in the entertainment industry working at MTV. And so with very, very young, he's like, just treat all celebrities or anyone with a platform like you would treat yourself. And so that's definitely been something I've carried with myself everywhere. You're touring.
And here at Gibson, with our new leadership, you know, they do the same thing. You know, now we have JC, our CEO, and Cesar, the president. those guys are like us. We could just sit here and talk and talk and talk. You don't feel like you're scared, like, oh no, they're in that position. There's nothing like that. I mean, they're just people. They treat you great. You can talk and joke with them. They have the same passion that we have because they're guitar players, and man, they are like I think I'm fanatic about guitars. Man, I can't compete with Cesar. I mean, he's up there. I mean, he's really got the passion, and he's really learned a lot since he's been here. A lot of things that he didn't really have to learn, but he's picked up a lot just because he's so interested. And so when you have leadership like that, and they treat you like people, and that's how you have to, treat everyone else. And I do everything. That's my outlook in the factory too. I look at it like everyone's in a band when you're in the factory, and everyone's playing a different instrument. And you could be your star sunburst painter, or you could be someone who maybe sands the guitar, or maybe a buffer who buffs the guitar. You're all just as important. No one's more important than the other guy. Because if one of those things fail, the whole guitar fails.
Yeah.
So you treat it like a band.
That's what I love about Gibson, and that's what I've noticed through a lot of the marketing going on. And I have some friends who are over at Gibson Custom Shop right now, and they all have the same things to say, and everyone's really good friends, and everyone's just very sincere and kind. And I actually got to meet JC at there's a store called Heber Breeze, which
Paul.
Yeah. And JC came out, and I got to meet him, and I was hanging out with him, and he's the nicest guy. Yeah. So nice. And we're just chatting, and you can kind of see us right here. It's hard to see. But we were hanging out. Yeah. Like, where's my camera? But he was so nice. And so I got to talk with him, and I was showing him my uncle's photos of Eddie with the Les Paul, but it's got both pickups in it. And he was yeah. But everyone's so nice.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, and that's one thing I learned, treat people how they, treat them like people, and they'll treat you like people back. You put them on a pedestal, or if you're scared, then people kind of act weird, So just treat them like you've always known them, and, it'll work out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes, I agree. That's great advice. You guys, this has been amazing. Jim Decola, dude. Thank you so much. I mean, for hanging out with us, and we're not scared, so we're gonna message you. And well, I got to give you Fat Dog's phone number and that picture of Garth Brooks anyway. So
yeah, right. And contact info. Yeah,
I'll send you that stuff.
Cool. It took a while, and I'm sorry it took a long time to coordinate it and stuff like that. But I'm glad we finally got to do it, and I enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. You guys, smash that thumbs up. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. And Jim, what do you have any pages you want people to know about any like a website or
no, anything? I don't have a website really. No, I don't. I don't know. I'm on Facebook and
buy a guitar.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Hit me up there, or I've done a lot of videos, like I said, for Gibson, so you can check those out. But yeah, I don't have a website or anything like that.
Okay. Yostinator, he's saying, when is the Epiphone Adam Jones being released?
Honestly, I don't know. While the Epiphone crew, Al, John, and Richard are great friends of mine, and we all meet a few times a week. When it comes time to the details and the calendarization of, releases and launches, I can't keep track with all that stuff. We have a lot of our own projects, and it's all I can do to try to pay attention to my stuff. So I can't, sorry. I honestly don't know when that is. Yeah. Or if it happened, who knows? There's been times where things are already released by Epiphone, and it's like people are asking me about them, like, oh, I didn't even know they got there yet, So but I know they're working on it. You know, Adam has been a great partner with us, and we did a lot of stuff with him. You know, at USA and Custom. So, but yeah, as far as dates, that I don't know. Yeah, he's a super nice guy. In fact, Cesar took a great picture of Adam and I peeking through the press that presses the ES tops and backs. And I was explaining to Adam, and we were looking in between the press, and Cesar was on the other side and snapped this great picture. So that was pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Photo opportunity. But he's a nice guy. There's a lot of these new guys. Mustaine, I mentioned him earlier. He's another one that's super, super nice. I know he has his reputation, you know, of being, you know, this rock star and, you know, hot-blooded and all that kind of stuff. But man, he's just a big teddy bear. He's just a super nice guy. And he lives like 10 minutes away from me down the street. Super nice. I've been to his place like half a dozen times. And yeah, super nice guy.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, well, Amanda, any last questions or
last question I'll ask you to leave out on this is from someone who's modding from home, like if they're working on guitars from home like Eddie would, what would you recommend they either own or they do from home?
No, just get a set of tools like I have.
Everything.
No, really, I mean, I collect tools like I collect, you know, guitars or whatever, you know, I mean, or effects pedals or whatever. I mean, and you may use one of these tools, you know, once every 2 years, and some tools you may use every time you're in the shop. The basic tools, you know, it depends on the level of modification that you're going to be getting into. If it's adjusting your guitar, you know, your basic nut files and screwdrivers and hex wrenches and things to adjust your action and pickups and neck, that sort of thing, and filing your nuts, saddles, things like that. Your basic setup tools, and you can get that stuff from Stuart McDonald or Music Nomad, places like that. They're very, very accessible now, and a lot of guitar players at home have them. So basic setup tools like that are very important. And then for electronics, just, you know, good quality soldering iron. I have a couple, I don't know if they're on camera. These old ones, actually, this one here, I've had this Weller. I'm proud of this Weller. I've had this same Weller from soldering iron. It's a 60-watt Weller. I've had it since 1982. And it blows my mind that it still works. I've gone through dozens of other of the same model, but for some reason this one's still rocking. But I've had dozens of other ones fail. But good quality soldering, and that's old school. Nowadays, you know, like at work, I have the soldering station that's, you know, digital and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. At home, I have this, and then I made this is a funny one. During the pandemic, I have to unplug it. During the pandemic, I made, I don't know if you can see this. There you go. So this is an effects box for my soldering irons.
Oh.
So it's an old school timer. So you wind it up for how many minutes, right? And you'll have power until this thing goes off. So it's kind of like that timer that you have on an old wash or old dryer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got the one fail I have with my soldering irons is that if I get forgetful, I'll leave them on, and that's not safe. You know, I mean, I've had a couple times where I've left them on, and a couple days later I come out in the shop and they're still on, and that's not safe. So I made that timer, so I'll put it on for however many minutes, and I work on it, and then if time runs out, well, then I'll just add more time. But if I walk away, it'll automatically turn off. So that's one thing I did because I know my own shortcomings. So it's because it's going to tick for 50 minutes until it's off. So, but it saves my soldering irons and saves the shop in case it, you know, something would touch and get caught on fire. But for soldering, good quality soldering iron or soldering station, good quality rosin solder. I use like a 30 thousandths diameter solder for most stuff for guitar. For amplifiers, sometimes I'll use, maybe 60 thousandths, a heavier solder, because I do a lot of amp work too. And then, all your basic soldering, hemostats. I have a ton of hemostats. These things, for basic hand tools, I use these things all the time, whether I'm soldering or sometimes you're just putting an inlay in, or for delicate things for grabbing. These things are invaluable. So I have a bunch of hemostats that I use of various sizes, and some of them are curved, some of them are flat, some of them are longer. But hemostats, X-Acto knives, there's a lot of those little hand tools that are very, very helpful and handy to have. So, basic stuff you can get by. And if you check out my videos that I did for Gibson, either the Instagram ones or on the Gibson's YouTube website, I cover a lot of stuff. I'll show how we set up action or set up a guitar at the factory, but I also throw in these MacGyver tech tips. So I show ways, if you don't have these tools, how you can get around that and use like a guitar pick for a action gauge or a dime or a nickel or whatever the case may be. So you can make it as complicated as you want, or you can MacGyver your way through it.
I love the MacGyver techniques too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'm gonna throw one of these into the chat. I found on the Gibson website or the Gibson YouTube. There's like how to adjust the height of your guitar pickups. That's like one that you did. Let's see. I'm gonna throw one of those in here so you guys can check those out. And then Yostinator left a comment. Jim, keep up the good work at Gibson. I love my new 70s Flying V and Explorer. And my antique natural Flying V and Explorer.
Awesome.
Yostinator is saying.
All right. Thank you.
Right on.
The 70s V and Explorers. Pickups. Suspicious might have done in the past.
Huh? What?
I'll just leave it at that.
Oh. Wow. Well, hey, I don't know. Let's see.
If you like the sound of this, you might like the sound of those.
Wow. Let me see. Let's see. Okay. Well, I don't know. Are we good? Are we cool? Because I feel horrible. I know it's almost 2 a.m. where Jim is. And I'm starting to feel a little bit.
Well, it's not that bad.
After hearing the story where he was up for 4 days.
Yeah. But man, those are some amazing stories, dude. And just thank you so much. Where's my applause? Thank you so much, and yeah, you'll have to come back.
Yeah,
you'll have to come back, and we should definitely keep in touch. Well, I mean, I've got you on Facebook, and we have all each other on Facebook and stuff. And
do you keep copies of the comments, or are you able to? Because if you did that, you might be able to, put together something else.
Sure. Oh yeah. It all gets burned into the video. So there's the comments and everything, and like I was saying earlier, these videos that we do, they're podcasts as well. So they're up on like Spotify and iHeart and Apple and like all that stuff.
All right, very cool.
So,
well, thank you, and thanks everyone for watching, and thanks for all the comments. I had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim. And I just got to say thank you to all our channel members here on Johnny Beane TV. Thank you again for all your continued support for this channel and these shows. I will see you guys tomorrow night, Saturday night. Yeah. Well, hey, we can say goodbye off the air really quickly. But thank you, everybody. And Jim, thank you again, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back. Don't hang up, Jim. All right. Good night, everybody. Johnny Beane TV. Bye-bye.